for November 16th, 2021. Being here, everybody. And first thing that we're going to do is stand, or however you'd like, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Say it with me if you would, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, council members, and whoever else joining us went along with that. I know it's a bit awkward to stand when we're on Zoom, but I still think we should, and I know y'all kind of agree with me. It's the best we can do under these kind of crazy circumstances. All right. So, clerk, could we have a roll call of the members, please?
Humby.
Here.
Gabriel.
Here.
Harrington.
Here.
O'Doherty.
Here.
Schmeckel.
Here.
Schuster.
Here.
Somerville.
Here.
Pierce.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
That's 9 present and 0 absent, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you very much, City Clerk. We have all council members present for the meeting. We're now going to go to the public comment on non-agenda items. That's the public comment on non-agenda items, and see who we have joining us tonight for that. Council members, it doesn't look like anyone has joined us this evening for a non-agenda item comment, so I imagine that we may have some comments for agenda items. Just another second in case somebody's thought of something. Doesn't look like it. Alrighty. Well, that being the case, I'd like to turn it over to the Vice Mayor for item number 5.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I move that the following change to the agenda be approved. We are taking item 9H from the consent agenda, and it will be our first item this evening for our regular agenda, moving it to item 10A.
Second.
Motion has been made, and there's a second from Councilmember Somerville. All those in favor of the motion and changes to the agenda, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that
Thank you.
the agenda be set as changed.
Second.
Motion and a second from Councilmember Somerville. Councilmember Schmeckel, I don't know if that. Were you going for the second?
I was going for the second.
Okay.
Councilmember Somerville got me.
All right.
So.
All right. It's been, the old joke. It's been thirded by Councilmember Schmeckel. So all those in favor, same sign as last time. Raise your hand. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. All right. The motion carries. We now have proclamations and public hearings section tonight. I believe we have only proclamations and no public hearings this evening. We have an item that we'd like to do a proclamation for every year. It's a really important one, and we really appreciate doing it. And I've had a council member volunteer to read that in for us for this proclamation for Small Business Saturday, and that was Councilmember Schmeckel. So I'd like to turn it over to him to read that on behalf of our council this evening. Over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. A proclamation. Whereas the governing body of Laramie, Wyoming celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community, according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 31.7 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of firms with paid employees, and they are responsible for 65.1% of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2019. And whereas the small business employ 47.1% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, 88% of U.S. consumers feel a personal commitment to support small businesses in the wake of the pandemic, and 92% of small business owners have pivoted the way they do business to stay open during the pandemic. And whereas 97% of Small Business Saturday shoppers recognize the impact they can make by shopping small, 85 of them also encouraged friends and family to do so too. And whereas 56% of shoppers reported they shopped online with a small business on Small Business Saturday in 2020, and more than 50% of consumers who reported shopping small endorsed a local business on social media or shopped at a local business because of a social media recommendation. And whereas Laramie, Wyoming supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities, and whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now therefore be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council of the governing body of the City of Laramie do hereby proclaim November 27th, 2021 as Small Business Saturday, and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. In witness whereof, Mayor Paul Weaver hereunto sets his hand and caused the official seal of the City of Laramie to be affixed this November 16th, 2021.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmackel. I appreciate that, and I think it was more than appropriate to have Councilmember Schmackel do that because he's, of course, done a lot of work with businesses in our community and small businesses. I think everybody on the council would agree with this statement, which is that Laramie wouldn't be what it is without our small business community, so many of them that we like and have so many good memories about. I see we've got a guest that's joined us, council members. It's a guest who wears different hats in our community. I believe the hat that's being worn tonight is that of Main Street Director, Laramie Main Street Director. I'd like to welcome Ms. Sherwood, and it's over to you, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. For many years, we've had such a beautiful collaboration with you, our council, and our staff at the City of Laramie in supporting our small locally owned businesses, not only downtown, but really county-wide. And this is a really important day and season for us, so I appreciate the recognition. And just a friendly reminder that last year we made this Small Business Week, and feedback from consumers was that they appreciated more than just the Saturday to shop. So we have over 50 businesses in our community that have offered week-long promotions that start on Friday the 26th, which we have rebranded as Plaid Friday. So if you want to support local on Black Friday, you can wear plaid and take advantage of those Small Business Saturday discounts in advance. You're ready to go, Mayor. So yeah, and we really enjoyed the collaboration between the Chamber and the Tourism Board. This year, we're also working with the Small Business Development Center. And so that partnership just continues to grow, and we build this event for our community. So thank you all for the recognition. And for those who want to start their shopping list now, those promotions are up at shopsmalllaramie.com.
Thank you so much. That's a really great update to get for us. And let me just throw in this little factoid because I'm a nerd and I can't help it. You know, there's a lot of discussion right now about how it might be difficult for people to do a lot of the kind of Christmas and holiday shopping they want to do. One thing that's consistent that I see in a lot of those articles is that a great way to avoid that and to support your local economy is to shop locally at your small businesses because they're facing a somewhat different situation than some of the big box stores and the national stores that might be struggling more with supply chain. Some of your smaller retailers, your independent retailers, yeah, it's not that they're not having trouble, but they're in a different situation, and they're more likely to have things around that you might want to buy. That's something I keep reading, and I think it's worth mentioning in this little comment. Anyway, thank you for being here, Director Sherwood. It's always nice to see you and to hear a little bit about small businesses, and we really appreciate it. Is it fair to say that most of our merchants, or at least a goodly number of them, also have online purchase options for people that want to shop online and things of that nature?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, thanks for asking that. Last year was the first year we put together an online shopping guide. We're going to do that again for Cyber Monday. So for those that are in the habit of sitting down at the computer on Monday, you can still shop local and support your Laramie businesses. So Main Street is developing a link that will be part of Small Business Week, and it'll take you to all of the Laramie-based businesses that have an e-commerce site.
Great. Thank you. And again, our thanks for being here to tell us about some Laramie businesses. We really appreciate it. Any other questions for Bree Sherwood? Okay. Well, we look forward to everybody shopping and supporting the local Laramie businesses in all the different ways that they can. And, you know, you can go down there and get stuff. You can go online. You can do whatever you need to do. And we're really happy to have that proclamation as part of our agenda tonight. Really great. We wish them a profitable and successful season. All righty, let's see. I think I had another council member who had volunteered. Councilmember O'Doherty had volunteered to read our next proclamation for the meeting tonight, and we appreciate it. So I'd like to turn it over to her.
Proclamation. Whereas this year will mark the 84th anniversary of the passage of the National Apprenticeship Act signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt on October 16th of 1937, which established the National Apprenticeship System. That's interesting. Whereas the National Apprenticeship Act established a comprehensive system of partnerships among employers, labor, educational institutions, and federal and state government, which has shaped skill training for succeeding generations of Laramie workers. And whereas for 84 years, apprenticeship has been provided and continues to provide state-of-the-art training using an earn while you learn model that has and continues to offer a pathway to middle class and a sustainable career for Laramie citizens. And whereas apprenticeship is an important post-secondary pathway for Laramie workers, offering a combination of academic and technical instruction with paid on-the-job training, resulting in nationally and industry-recognized occupational credential that ensures higher earnings for apprentices and highly skilled workforce for Laramie employers, associations, and unions. And whereas the apprenticeship system has continually modernized and developed innovative training approaches to meet the workforce needs of industry to address the evolving challenges of staying competitive in today's and tomorrow's global economy. And whereas the apprenticeship is positioned to continue to be a valuable option for training Laramie workers now and in the future. Whereas the celebration of Laramie Apprenticeship Week would honor and encourage industries who utilize or could benefit from the apprenticeship model to train Laramie workers and recognize the role the apprenticeship system has on preparing Laramie apprentices for sustainable careers with family-sustaining wages. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council of Laramie, Wyoming, recognize November 15th through 21st of 2021 as Laramie Apprenticeship Week.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. And I know we've got a couple of guests here. And I would just like to say, I had not been aware, or if we did this last year, I did not remember, but I think this is an exceptionally cool and interesting thing to recognize. I think apprenticeships, they're kind of having a moment as they're coming back into their importance as a piece of workforce training and employment opportunities for people. So I think this is great. And I see there's some people here that know a heck of a lot more about it than I do. So I'll turn it over to whoever would like to say something. All right, I see that. And whoever else would like to say something, you'll get a chance too. Lord Baker, Miss Baker, thank you for being here. Why don't I turn it over to you and you can tell us about it.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. I appreciate it. We have some apprentices and participating employers with us today, but apprenticeship isn't just for welding and HVAC anymore. We actually have technical apprenticeships, and Wyoming was the first in the region to create a cybersecurity technician apprenticeship and an IT specialist apprenticeship to address the workforce shortage. And Digitex is here with us today as a participating employer. That's Shane Brown there. He's waving. My business partner, Pat Wolfenbarger, is here today. And then Javen Paoli is an apprentice, and he's a little shy, so he may not come through today, but I'm sure Shane will talk to him. But he's also here, and he's a cybersecurity technician apprentice. Apprenticeship takes IT skills and it rounds them out with soft skills, as well as you can be a specialist in technology. But just like doctors, you wouldn't want a pediatrician to necessarily operate on your ankle. Same thing in IT. You have a lot of specialties. And so cybersecurity is an umbrella for all of those specialties, and it helps create the overall glue that holds IT together for everything. And what we're trying to do is create IT generalists for Wyoming with a cybersecurity umbrella. Apprenticeship in general really increases employee engagement. And according to the Gallup poll in 2020, businesses that are in the top 25% of employee engagement are more profitable, more productive, have better customer ratings, experience less absenteeism, and suffer fewer safety incidents. But apprenticeship is free to employers. So there's really no reason not to do it. So I thank you today for allowing us to come here and talk. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Shane, if that's okay with you, Mayor Weaver, to let him talk a little bit about being a participating employer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Go ahead.
Well, you didn't ask if it was okay with me, Laura. I did not prepare anything. I didn't know you were going to throw me in the spotlight here. But yes, we have been doing the apprenticeship program for a while now, and we have a great apprentice, Javen, who is hiding at the moment, but it allowed us to actually create a program where when employees come in, we can grow them from the ground floor, train them on actual true skill sets that are useful instead of stuff that they do which learn bad habits, and give them the confidence with what they're doing to, of course, do their job better when they're helping the small businesses, especially on the cybersecurity and the IT side, because it's extremely important. A lot of small businesses obviously don't necessarily understand the importance. They don't think cybersecurity pertains to them in a way. They think that, oh, nobody's really paying attention to us, but it allows us to educate the employees, who in turn educate the people they're talking to. And I think it just does a lot to grow them quite quickly in the process.
That's great. Thank you for that. Yeah, I could see why this would be an important service and another aspect of the local economy that we really need. And I appreciate those comments. Well, I would like to thank you for being here to help us recognize and do a little proclamation for Apprenticeship Week. I think it's great. And I think it's great how you emphasize there's lots of different types of apprenticeships available out there. It's not all about plumbing and HVAC. Not that there's anything wrong with plumbing and HVAC, but there's a whole broad range of careers where apprenticeship applies. So that was good. That was good for us to hear about this from you all, and we thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And no, it's our pleasure. You're so welcome, and we look forward to hearing more about your business and maybe seeing you here at the council for something else. But great to see you this evening. Thank you so much. All right, and we thank Councilmember O'Doherty for volunteering to read in that proclamation. We have some announcements, I think, from the staff. I'm not sure if we have more than just our staff recognition, so I'd like to go over to staff for announcements, however many and whichever announcement they are. I don't know who's up.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 staff announcements, and then we'll do our staff recognition. I'll start with Public Works for the first announcement, and then the second announcement will be from our planning manager, Derek Taney, and then we'll come back to me.
Great.
Hey, Honorable Mayor, City Council, just wanted to let everybody know our utility crews have been working on a collapsed sanitary sewer main this afternoon. It's in the alley at 12th Street between Gibbon and Harney. We can't get it repaired safely tonight, so we're going to bypass pump. The guys are out right now running about 400 feet of hose. The reason I want to let you know is that pump was going to cause some noise tonight. We're letting residents in the area know that that pump's going to be running. We're going to have staff checking on that every couple hours to make sure the pump is still running and everything's flowing. And then crews will return first thing tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get it all taken care of tomorrow and buttoned up. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Webb. That's kind of update that we need to know about, and hopefully it all gets taken care of on that timeline that you just gave us. Appreciate Public Works doing what they can to get things taken care of as they come up. All right. Let's see. I don't know who was next.
It was planning manager Taney.
Oh yeah, Mr. Taney. Yeah, thank you, City Manager. Mr. Taney. Give him a second. Oh, there he is.
Mayor, Council, I just wanted to briefly take a moment to introduce our new principal planner to the city of Laramie. Next to me here, I'll kind of turn the screen in a moment so you can see his face a little bit better, is Philip Gabatuller, and he is on his week 3 technically with us, and so I'm just going to let him speak a little bit about himself, just to introduce himself, and you'll be seeing him more as we progress through the year.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you for the time. I'm just glad to be here, as Derek mentioned, from Virginia. Been in the planning field about 12 years, so I really look forward to the challenges and opportunities here in Laramie and learning from Derek and the staff here. So thank you. Look forward to working with everybody.
That's great. Thank you so much. And it's great to get an opportunity to sort of meet you, get to know you a little bit, and there'll be more of those as we go down the road. That's great. We appreciate it. Right.
Thanks, Mayor, Council.
Way to share the camera. Go ahead. All right. City Manager, I think it's your turn.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my honor tonight to talk about the city's rock star of the month, or kind of our employee of the month. And I'm going to ask Assistant City Manager Todd Fieser to assist me in this. This month, our employee recognition goes to the staff who support Jubilee Days, and we're calling them our Laramie Jubilee Days crew. What's interesting to note about this group is this is a cross-departmental group starting in the city manager's office that involves pretty much, to some degree, all of our main core operational divisions, such as police, parks, the city manager's office, the street division, the solid waste crews, et cetera. This nomination was made by our assistant city manager, so I'm going to ask him to articulate a little bit more with respect to the work that goes on to support Jubilee Days. But we like to point out that, you know, the city crews that do this, they really are kind of the unsung heroes and the behind the scenes folks who make this wonderful annual celebration go off without a hitch in Laramie and allow us to not only visit with each other and share community locally, but to invite visitors to enjoy our community as well. So with that, I think I'll let Todd Fieser jump in and fill in the gaps here, and look forward to any questions you might have. And it's a pleasure to recognize the hard work these folks do every year.
Absolutely. Thanks, Janine. I just want to make sure if everybody can hear me, not to rub it in, but I'm in Florida right now. One of the things that really came to mind as Janine was talking is, you know, it really takes everybody. And when you go to that first planning meeting that we held this year at the police department, and you've got everybody from the city manager's office, city clerk's office, streets, parks, solid waste, public works, just the police, the fire department, and you think about the group that comes together to make Jubilee Days happen is really just awe-inspiring and what they pull off for our community. The other thing that was really pretty imperative for me is that I kind of ended up becoming the point man for Sean Faxon from Laramie Jubilee Days Committee, and every time they had a question or needed something a little extra, I just moved it on down the line to the right department, and without hesitation, your city staff stepped up and just took care of all the problems and anything that might have been an issue and figured it out really quick and had it ready to go. And they're just top notch from top to bottom. And I think that it was important to recognize all the city staff that participate with Jubilee Days to make sure that they know we appreciate what they do and that we notice it and we recognize it, even though the community may not notice it and recognize it as they're having fun enjoying those activities. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
That's a really great thing for this council to hear about. And, you know, in some ways, there are crews and teams of employees for the city of Laramie that, if they're really doing their job and doing it well, they're probably not going to be noticed, right? Because they're sort of, as you say, assistant city manager, they're getting the stuff done behind the scenes that makes things like Jubilee Days happen and be a smooth and enjoyable event for people. So I think that's was a really good move to nominate and kind of identify and celebrate a crew for something. I really like that. Any questions? Any comments? I was wondering how long Jubilee Days has been going on. Council Member Schuster.
Thank you. If you want me to send you a video of the first Jubilee Days, I do have that. It was just after World War II, and it looks like most of the things happened at Undian Park, and I can get that to you. As somebody that's been on Jubilee Days committees longer than I've been on city council, which means quite a few years, I really wish to thank the city. They have been so helpful every single year we've done something. So yeah, I just want to put out that second thank you, because I'm hidden behind the scenes, the shoots to Jubilee Days, and don't get to see all of it going on either, but have always really appreciated how well managed downtown is and everything like that. Being the friends of several police officers, I've even walked the dances with them just to make sure things are good there. Not many of the people I know are still on the force. They've moved on, so that's been a little tough on me, but I think everybody there does a fantastic job. So thank you very much, City of Laramie, for what you helped us out with Jubilee Days.
You're here. Well said. Absolutely. All right. Well, good starters for the meeting tonight, council members. Good proclamations, and some good announcements. And although the public works thing wasn't necessarily a happy one, it's good to know that they're all over it and getting it taken care of, and to let us know what the timeline was. So it was useful and helpful. Council, that gets us into item number 7, which is our standard opportunity to identify any disclosures that any city council members may have about any items on our agenda tonight. Are there any? None. All right. I would like to disclose that I may need to have another cup of coffee despite the late hour, and I might just do that. We've now got item number 8, and I'd like to turn it over to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the consent agenda be approved and that each specific action on the consent agenda be approved as indicated.
Second.
That's a motion, a second from, I believe that was Councilmember Schuster. He's waving to somebody, but I don't think it's us. And, we'll go to the city clerk for a roll call vote on this item.
Humby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. That motion carries. The consent agenda has been approved. That takes us to our next item, which is number 10, to open the regular agenda. And I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Harrington for item number 11.
Mr. Mayor, there's
we got
an
item
item
number 10A. Item number 10A, thank you. Didn't write that one down. I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Gabriel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for the replacement of the playground at Kiowa Park. And I would move that City Council approve the grant agreement for land and water conservation funds between the State of Wyoming, Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources, Division of State Parks, Historic Sites and Trail, City of Laramie, for the replacement of the playground at Kiowa Park in an amount not to exceed $42,500 and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
The motion and a second from Councilmember Cumby. Thank you very much. Assistant City Manager Fieser, I'm not sure if you were around for our discussion for this in the pre-meeting, but we saw this item and it was very closely related to some other parks items, and we really think it's a good idea for us to exercise these opportunities to talk about parks and upgrades and improvements to them, because they're such a popular part of Laramie and everybody really appreciates these amenities. So I think we kind of want to make sure that we get these things out there and to talk about it. I see we've got Mr. Hunter from Parks here too, so that's great. I think I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hunter to talk to us about this. But I don't know. I don't know who's going first. If it's Assistant Manager Fieser or Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter, it looks like it's you, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, as staff, we do playground inspections annually, major playground inspections annually. We also check the playgrounds at least once a month for safety issues. And as we go through our safety protocols, we start noticing certain playgrounds either starting to degrade or safety issues starting to happen. And we take that very seriously. And it's time, at this time in Kiowa's life, it's time to upgrade this particular park. It's a relatively small footprint, and since we have gone and have received land water conservation funds for this project, it's a good time to put a decent playground there. My plan is to make sure that we build up instead of out, because the footprint is relatively small. I also would like to update some of the ADA seating around this particular playground. We do get a lot of young kids through preschools and whatnot utilize this space because it's away from traffic. It has a nice undeveloped property right behind it. And it's got a pretty decent green space for the kids to roll around in. And with that, I'll open it to any questions because I'm not exactly sure what you would like to know.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. You know what? I don't think it's so much that we had a bunch of difficult questions to ask you. It's that we wanted to hear that update and those kind of general details that you just gave us, and I really appreciate it. That's exactly why we wanted to move it forward and put it on the regular agenda, because it's good for us to hear those things. And I say I've got Councilmember O'Doherty. Go ahead.
I didn't know the part about the inspections, and I'm glad to do it, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Also, for the council's information, I am going out for RFQs tomorrow. So I'm hoping to get some designs for both Washington Park and Kiowa Park right after Christmas time to start moving forward with constructions either in late spring or early summer.
That sounds good. Other questions for Mr. Hunter? No, we have another item coming up that's going to be similar, and we're looking forward to hearing about that too. Yeah, just to be clear, Mr. Hunter, the reason we moved this up wasn't for additional scrutiny. It's just that, well, I don't have to tell you, parks are a big point of pride here in Laramie. So when we've got stuff on our agenda about parks, I think a lot of times we'd like to hear about it and give you folks from the staff that work really hard to keep them safe and nice and as popular as they are a chance to tell us about it. That's what it's about.
I really appreciate that, and I know that my staff really appreciates that as well.
Yeah, we really want to recognize that work that you guys do. I mean, parks they're real gems in Laramie and a big part of what makes the community and the town so nice. So yeah, we want to hear about it. Let's see if we have a public comment about this. Anybody else wants to join us in singing the praises of our Laramie park system? I've heard it many times, but they may not be waiting to do that this evening. All right. I don't see any, council, so we'll go and I'll give you another chance if you thought of a question or you want to say something nice about parks. Now's a good time to do it. Otherwise, we'll go to the city clerk for a vote. City clerk, can we have a roll call?
Humby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. That motion carries. And we'll now go to item number 11, which is Council Member Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve original ordinance number 2030 on third and final reading, vacating approximately a 102,500 square foot area of right-of-way, including a portion of Lewis Street, 11th Street, 12th Street, and the alley within and adjacent to Block 2, University Place addition, as recommended by the Planning Commission on December 7th, 2021.
Thank you very much. Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Council Member.
Oh. Mr. Mayor, I would just ask the second to just forgive that last part about December 7th. That's coming up.
So Councilmember Schmeckel, I think I have to give this to Councilmember Somerville. It's the verbal. It's the verbal on the second. I think, right? For record keeping purposes. Yeah, our city clerk is telling us yes. So you got to get on the mute button and we'll get you the second. All right, Councilmember Somerville, you caught that. You had no objection to that.
I have no objection. Second agrees. Yep.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, and I see that we've got Mr. Teeny here who's probably like to give us the background for it, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Mayor, Council, thank you. As noted, this item is the vacation of Lewis Street and some of those adjacent streets in the area. Just like last time, the current item is required prior to vacation to have completed all the elements found within the MOU that the city of Laramie entered into with the University of Wyoming. Those items have not been completed yet. And so until those items are completed, this will remain postponed. And so we're postponing it to the next meeting and we'll see where they stand after that item. And so that's really all I have for tonight on this. I'll keep it short.
I appreciate that, Mr. Cheney. And there may be some questions, but I'm going to go back to Councilmember Harrington. He still has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to move to postpone original ordinance 2030 until our December 7th, 2021 meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second from Councilmember Schmeckel on the postponement. Mr. Cheney, are they staying in pretty close touch with you or our partners at the University of Wyoming about what's going on with this? It kind of seems like this has been taking an unusual amount of time. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Mayor, Council, they are keeping in touch with us on this project. Largely their coordination specifically related to MOU is going through our Public Works Department, Brooks Webb and Eric Japp. I see both of them on the call. I could let them update you a little bit on maybe current status, but what I'm doing is I'm keeping in direct communication with our public works staff, and we're making sure that before this item is considered by the council, that I have the go ahead from our public works team that the items within the MOU have been completed to their satisfaction. So I know that things are not going completely as planned with this project with them. So, but that's kind of where they're at right now.
No, I really appreciate that, Mr. Tini, and my comment was not in any way to be taken as a question to the staff for why this has taken so long. Just sort of a general inquiry about the length of time. I guess it's not the end of the world if it doesn't get done before, December 7th or whatever it may be. If there are staff members that want to chime in on this, you certainly have an opportunity. If you don't, I think Mr. Tini has summarized it pretty well for us. Other questions for Mr. Tini on this topic? No? Okay, let's see if there's a public comment on the postponement. Doesn't seem to be. Give it just a second. Don't look like it. City Clerk, let's have a roll call vote on this.
Somerville,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Cumby,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. So we'll now go to item number 12. And of course, I'm going to need a reminder for my council person introducing it. Councilmember Gabriel, thank you. Over to you, sir.
You bet. Thank you, Mayor. We talked about Kiowa Park just a few minutes ago. This is for playground equipment repair and replacement at Washington Park. The motion, I would move the City Council approve the grant agreement for land and water conservation funds between the State of Wyoming Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources, Division of State Parks, Historic Sites and Trail, City of Laramie for the replacement of the playground at Washington Park in an amount not to exceed $108,720. Authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second from Councilmember Schuster. Thank you both, and welcome back. Mr. Hunter, tell us about this project a little bit.
Honorable Mayor and council members, Washington Park is our flagship park. This is it's got the oldest playground left in our system. All the other playgrounds will have been replaced. Kiowa was the other one. So Washington Park main playground is 27 years old. It was put in 1994. And if you look at the footprint there, it's a relatively large footprint. And we're looking more and more at the synthetic turfs, and those are generally a little bit more pricey. However, in my tenure with the City of Laramie Parks Department, I've refreshed Washington Park's engineered wood fiber at least 4 times to a tune of about $2,000 at a time. So eventually it just creeps up on you. And again, with our safety inspections, we are starting to see some deterioration in some of the climbers, some of the handles, and some of the decking. So Washington Park has been deemed time for replacement. The tornado slide was replaced, I think, back in 2010 or so with a little small swirl slide and play area. And then the tot lot was replaced, I do believe, around 2009, 2010 as well. We do have a little bit of safety surfacing issues there, but those can be taken care of with the current budgets. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Hunter on this project? Yeah, Councilmember Gabriel, thank you.
Hey, Scott, I'm just curious, Scott, or Brooks talks about some of the replacement for his Public Works Department supply issues. What about playground equipment? Will you be able to replace this equipment at Washington Park and Kiowa in a timely fashion?
Honorable Mayor, through you, Councilor Pat, I have been seeing some shipping issues. Most playground designers and manufacturers have these playgrounds either custom built or in stock. So the time lag for us is going to be probably the shipping aspect. And what will happen is after we go through the RFQ process and we decide on a design firm and a company to go with, they'll go ahead and start making or manufacturing that playground. And that's why we have such a long lead time from RFQ to actual construction. So we can hopefully kind of mitigate that, that extended construction. So again, after we figure out which company we're going to use, we'll sit down and have a conversation about timelines. And timelines are usually about 25% of my consideration for going with whichever company we decide to choose.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
Yes, sir.
Dang it, I always forget to unmute. I said thank you, Council Member Gabriel, for that question. It's a good point to bring it up about the delays and everything. Other questions for Mr. Hunter? All right, let's see if there's a public comment about this item. I guess I would just identify, just for clarity, the reason that this parks item was on the agenda and the other was not was the dollar amount involved in the grant application. But as we explained earlier, we think it's good to talk about our park stuff because we're proud of them. Let's see if we have any public comment on this. I don't see any. Council members, their comments on this item? I guess, since we do allow each other to do this, I'd ask you to just let me do a little memory lane. And I remember when the equipment that's being replaced now was the new snazzy equipment that replaced some of the old log structures and other things, log structure playground equipment, and the really old slide that they wouldn't let anybody put there in Washington Park now that was there pre-1994. Time flies, but we try to have the parks keep up with things. All right, I don't see anything else. Appreciate your further background on that item, Mr. Hunter, very much. City Clerk, can we have a roll call?
Gabriel.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. Council members, that brings us now into item number 13. And I'm going to recognize Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve Resolution 2021-70 for approving the distribution and publication of a notice of intention to issue and sell general obligation bonds, Series 2021, to be issued by the City of Laramie in the principal amount not to exceed $4,135,000 and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second from Councilmember Cumby, I believe. Yes? All right. The motion and a second from Councilmember Cumby. And I see that we've got our Chief Operation Officer Brown here with us for the beginning of our background and a number of other guests joining us this evening. So I'd like to recognize COO Brown right off the top. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. Good evening. We're now at the second series of bonding our SPT tax, which was passed back in 2018. And bonding allows to have an influx of money into these projects and really instead of waiting to collect the non-bonded money. And so some of the projects that we're doing on this second bonding at this end of the year is we're going to put some more money into streets, 2.2 million. We have facilities money going into the City Hall annex, upgrades. There's a lot of things that need to be happening here. And there's some money for trails for Spring Creek and a little bit of parks. So that's the projects we're bonding this time. That's going forth. And like I said, the bonding's being paid for once we bond through the 1% tax collection. Instead of the project, it will be paying for the project, the actual bonding. So we'll get the money up front. I'd like to introduce a couple of people who are helping me with the bonding. Rick Thompson is the bond legal counsel, and Todd Bishop is with Kaiser Wealth. He's the actual financing person and helping placing the bonds. And I thought Rick maybe could go over the resolution, and maybe Todd could give us the actual timeline of bonds, because there's a timeline of all the things we have to get done by the end of the year. So Rick, maybe if you'd like to go over things first. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Mayor Weaver, members of the City Council, Rick Thompson, Hathaway, and Coons, pleased to be serving as your bond counsel once again this year. The resolution you have before you tonight is a resolution that's required under state law to provide notice of your intent to sell general obligation bonds. State statute requires that it be published for 3 consecutive weeks in a local newspaper. So following this meeting, after approval of the resolution, we would get the notice of intent over to the newspaper and start that publication process. This resolution also authorizes Kaiser & Company as your financial advisor to begin the process of soliciting bids for the bonds. And once those are subscribed for through that process, we would be coming back to you on your December 7th meeting with a bond ordinance that has all the terms of the bonds for your approval, and to proceed to bond closing on December 15th. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that resolution. It's pretty straightforward, but it's mostly for purposes of giving notice of intent required by state statute.
Any questions for our bond counsel, Mr. Thompson? Mr. Thompson, I don't see any questions at this time.
Thank you.
See, we had another guest that had been
Todd Bishop. It's Todd Bishop, so Todd may want to speak.
Ms. Bishop?
Good evening.
Bishop, if you'd like to. Yep.
You bet. Thank you, Mayor Weaver and Council. Mr. Thompson, he stole my thunder. He sort of went through the timeline and covered most of that. So I would just add maybe additional bit of color. We'll be sending out what we call a placement summary. It's a document that just talks about why are the bonds being issued, how will this debt be repaid. We'll be sending that document out to all of the banks in Albany County, as well as banks around the state of Wyoming that purchase this type of investment for their portfolios. And once we have those bids back on December 3rd, we'll tabulate those, make a recommendation to Ms. Brown and her staff, and then we'll bring that recommendation to you for your consideration at that meeting on December 7th. So would be happy to answer any questions if there is any.
Mr. Bishop, I really thank you for adding that little piece in, because that's actually something that there is sometimes some interest and some questions generated about that portion of the process that you covered. So I do appreciate those additional comments. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Bishop? Yep, Councilmember O'Doherty, thank you.
Are bonds typically pretty high rated bonds?
Mayor Weaver, through you, these bonds, we are not going to go through and incur that rating fee this time. As in 2020, we have found that we're able to go and successfully place all of these bonds locally with the banks and not have to incur the additional expense of paying for a bond rating and the additional legal expense that goes with making those publicly offered. So I think I'll be able to illustrate, as I did in 2020, that the city of Laramie will get a very, very competitive rate compared to other issues that are in the market that did in fact have to incur some of that additional expense. And part of the reason of that is there is not a lot of tax exempt general obligation debt issued by governing bodies in the state of Wyoming. So that scarcity provides you with quite simply a lower rate because it's highly sought after.
Thank you. Now I remember that you told us that last year.
I think it's valuable information, and I think it's really interesting how much of that is able to stay within the community, so to speak. And I see that Malia Brown is raised her hand. Go ahead.
I just wanted to, Mayor, through you, answer Councilor Doherty's question, about our bond rating. We did have a really good bond rating on our water refinances. It was a AA. So it's a low risk. We have good financials, and I just wanted to answer her question for that. Thanks.
Appreciate that, Director Brown. Mr. Bishop, can I just make sure that I understood you right? I believe so, but there's a great deal of interest in this type of a bond issuance for reasons that you've already explained, and I think I heard you talk about how a lot of that was able to be kept within the Laramie finance community for the reasons that you outlined.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think that's correct. These bonds will, of course, be offered to all of the banks in Albany County. They'll be given that opportunity to bid on those. And I think as in last time in 2020, I believe a good portion of those were able to remain right there within the community.
I really appreciate that, and I just wanted to cover that again a little bit because I think it's remarkable, and I think it's a good thing, and it's interesting. Do we have other questions for either Mr. Thompson or Mr. Bishop or our COO? Danny, why don't we see if there's any public comment on this topic? Don't see any. Other questions? Well, I'll say this. I'd like to say this just as a small closing remark about this because it is a significant topic and a significant financial issue for the city. I don't necessarily have a lot of expertise, nor do I pretend to about this particular area. But I do think it's worth noting that a lot of that stays local. And I also think it's very important for us to always acknowledge and thank the taxpayers' willingness to approve this and move forward with these projects and their recognition that these are important things that they want to see done in our community because that's where it really starts. And so, of course, we want to acknowledge that. And we look forward to the next phase of these projects moving forward and how this helps us get those things done sooner than later. City Clerk, let's have a roll call vote.
Somerville,
Yes.
Cumbie,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you very much, City Clerk, and thank you to both of our guests that joined us, and we'll probably be seeing you again for the other parts of this moving forward. So we thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Takes us into Item number 14, and I'm looking for Councilmember O'Doherty.
I move the council approve the first reading and introduction of original ordinance 2033, amending chapter 15.24, adopting the 2021 International Code Series and updating language to conform to International Code Series.
Second.
Motion and a second from Vice Mayor Pierce. I think we'll probably turn it over to Assistant City Manager Feeser for background. Is that correct?
Mayor, I believe that Clarice Hoff and Fire Marshal Johnson are together.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And you know, folks, I'm sorry about that. I just didn't recognize or know who to address from the screen name. Welcome, both of you. Thank you. We're here to listen to what you've got to tell us. On this
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. We're bringing forward the request to adopt the 2021 International Code Series. The state of Wyoming adopted September 22nd, 2021. And so we're bringing it forward to council. In the adoption, we adopted as a whole, as the state does. And so we're bringing it forward. And I have a PowerPoint. Nancy, do we have that? But it was in your packet that the adoption of the code series as to why we're adopting it. And it's to continue on with the protect the health and safety of the public by regulating the minimum requirements for the new and existing building, facilities, storage, and processes, and to regulate and govern the safeguarding of life and property for the deficiencies in design, construction, and maintenance of buildings that are occupied or will be occupied in the future. And so we're bringing this forward. We have 6 months to get this adopted and approved through this. That is the state's time limit that they give us to get this approved. The state tied it to authority having jurisdiction in 2012 to the actual adoptee debit. So it is important that we move forward with this as we did with the electrical code for 2020, so that we maintain our authority having jurisdiction. The ICC, they move through their code cycle every 3 years. So right now they're in the process of adopting or writing for 2024 International Code Series. So it's a continual thing for every 3 years that it comes about. So in the updating and with bringing the adoption of the 2021 International Code Series, we also are bringing forward to updating the year to state, rather than indicating each year, bringing the verbiage to say most recently adopted additions that will allow for any future changes to be adopted going forward. They're in the reference sections, they're in the appendix for the International Residential Code. They did have a change in how their appendix was indicated, and that was also noted and updated. The deleted sections, those were from back in 2005. The sections we deleted out that is encumbered within the International Code Series at this time. When the 2005 was put into the ordinance, they were in the process at that point adopting the 2003 code series. And since we have been adopting every 3 years, and then when the state put in their requirement for us to follow suit and adopt, when they adopt the International Code Series, it kind of made those obsolete in 2005.
I know a lot of it, Mayor and Councilman, was just cleaning up a little bit of language. There was some redundancies in our ordinances that were covered by code. So we can go over those if you would like, but and I don't have those with me at this moment, but so anyway, that was some of the striking of the language to adopt it on every 3 year occurrence, because once the state adopts it, unless we want to lose home rule, we have to adopt the code. So.
And also when our building inspectors, when we are inspecting or reviewing, we're reviewing to the International Code Series. And when going through this and looking at and making those changes, either there are sections now that are not in the International Code, or the sections have changed, which if a builder was looking at it, it would be confusing to them as to which codes they need to be looking at. And as far as some of the ordinances, the wording was just off enough to cause a little bit of confusion. So we took this opportunity to do some housekeeping on that and bring it current and in conjunction with the International Code Series.
Well, thank you very much. And although I can't say for sure, I suspect that there is not a desire for you to walk through the redundancies for us. I think we're probably going to listen to our folks from fire and code. And I think you both summed that up for us pretty well. First of all, we have to do it. And second of all, there's cleanup language in there that if we don't do it, it doesn't really make sense, and it makes our code somewhat out of whack with current standards. Every 3 years is the adoption.
That is correct.
Updates. All right. Council members, any further questions? We'll see if there's a public comment on this item. Give that just a second. Seeing none, Council, I'll go back to you one more time because that's how we do it. Yes, Councilmember Gabriel.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I was just curious, since Laramie is unique in that it has the tallest buildings in the state in the several dorms, is there anything unique to Laramie that is a little bit different from other cities around the state, or is this all encompassing when you talk about the code for the state?
No, excuse me, council member, it is all encompassing. So this code would apply to Cheyenne as well as Land or any other place that adopts this code. So if that, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Sounds like you got it for us. Listen, we really appreciate you being here to go through this item. You know, in some ways it's a little bit routine. In other ways it's extremely important because these things are updated, and when this kind of stuff gets ignored, and cities and the bodies that are responsible don't stay on top of this stuff, that's when tragedies and bad accidents happen. That's why these things are reviewed and brought forward, and why they're updated, and why we take a look at them. Nobody wants to be that community that's on the headline because they didn't stay on top of these things and they didn't have the good city staff that helped them stay on top of these things. So we appreciate you being here tonight. All right, City Clerk, let's have a roll call vote.
Cumbie,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk, and thanks again. Gets us into the next item, Council, and that's item number 15. And I am looking for Councilmember
Councilmember Pierce.
Vice Mayor Pierce. Vice Mayor Pierce, it's over to you.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. I move to approve Resolution 2021-71, transferring unencumbered and unexpended appropriations balances from one fund to another and amending appropriations for the fiscal year 2020-2021 annual budget of the City of Laramie, Wyoming, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
I think that was a second from Councilmember Cumbie. A motion and a second. And I see that we have Ms. Wade from City Finances here, so we'll turn it over to her. Welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Councilors. This evening, I have the pleasure of presenting two budget amendments for your consideration. The first budget amendment is the final appropriation adjustment for fiscal year 2021, and I certainly feel ready to put that fiscal year behind us. This is a routine budget amendment, and most of this amendment you have actually already seen in the space of awarding bids and contracts or approving agreements. And so just as a matter of reminder before we get started on the details for these amendments, our council presentation focuses on items you have not already seen or approved. But for the council and for members of the public, full detail for the budget amendment is included in your budget amendment packet. And so anyone who is interested in the full detail certainly has access to it. And with that, I'll discuss the full detail for the 2021 amendment. We are recommending that you approve a budget adjustment of $1,354,720. Now, of this amount, you have not already approved $200,230. $40,230 of that adjustment is in the city's governmental funds, and $160,000 of the adjustment is in the city's internal service fund, the health insurance fund. All of the adjustments recommended for this evening's amendment for the enterprise funds have already been approved. Also, all of this evening's amendment to fiscal year 2021 is being funded by available cash reserves. Now we're going to move on to the fund level detail. In the general fund, there are a few items of note. We are recommending a $30,000 adjustment to the city attorney's division for additional expenditures on outside legal fees due to the volume of litigation the city has been involved in the past fiscal year. In the Public Works Administration division, we're recommending an adjustment of $3,000 to align our health insurance expense budget a little bit better with the actuals for the year. And in the Ice and Events Center, we're recommending a budget adjustment of $7,230 transfer appropriations between fiscal years 2022 and 21. And so when we get to our next amendment, you're going to notice a reduction in the 2022 budget. And this is to adjust for project timing. This appropriation was approved in 2022, but based on the project schedule, it happened a little bit earlier than we expected. And so we're going to reduce 22 and add to fiscal year 2021. The final piece of the 2021 amendment that you haven't seen is a $160,000 increase to the city's health insurance fund. This is for additional insurance expenses that were offset by insurance claim revenue. And so these types of adjustments can typically happen at the end of the fiscal year when expenditures and revenue in this fund vary from our initial budget projections. And at this time, I would like to open it up for any questions on the fiscal year 2021 amendment.
Okay. Well, do we have any questions? Come on now, council members. Our staff has gone through all the trouble to be here and provide us with a breakdown. We might as well have some questions. Although the breakdown was pretty thorough, so it might have addressed them all. That looks like that is the case. Vice Mayor Pierce, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say how much I really appreciate Malia and Jen and their team. They do fabulous work time and time again. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that acknowledgement.
That's a big time agreement from everybody here on the council. You know, I look through our things and I consider some of the information that we get from the city manager's office, and I occasionally start to be very, very concerned and worried. And then I remember some of the people, well, really all of the people that we have working for the city of Laramie, and it gives me a little bit better sense of our ability to figure out what the heck we're going to do. So I really agree with those comments, and I think the rest of the council does as well. Let's see if we have a public comment on any of the budget amendments that we're talking about right now. I don't see any. So go back to the council one more time, see if anybody's thought of anything they'd like to add. Yep, Councilmember Schuster, thank you.
Just wanted to echo what was said, being on Finance Committee several times now, and over multiple years, that it's been really good to deal with someone as professional as our group here, because they do have our best interests in mind. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. I totally agree with that. And we should emphasize, when we talk about our best interests in mind, we're not talking about the city council. We're talking about people in Laramie. We're talking about residents of the city of Laramie. We thank you very, very much. And we'll go to a vote. Let's have a roll call vote. City Clerk.
Schuster.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you very much, City Clerk. And thank you very much, Jen, for being here. We're glad to see you and appreciate the presentation very much. Right, that gets us now to item number 16, which is going to be the second part of this party. And council members, once again, I need your help. Who am I going for? Who am I looking to help us?
Councilor Schuster.
Councilmember Schuster, you have the floor.
Thank you. Our title is Resolution 2021-72, Budget Amendments for Fiscal Year 2021 and 22. I move the council approve Resolution 2021-72, transferring unencumbered or unexpended appropriation balances from one fund to another and amending appropriations for the fiscal year 2021-2022 annual budget of the city of Laramie, Wyoming, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second from Vice Mayor Pierce. We will go back to Jen. Thank you.
Hello again, Honorable Mayor and City Councilors. This is our first budget amendment for fiscal year 2022. And I wish I could tell you that it was going to be as concise as 2021, but I will do my best to move us through this material in a way that really highlights what you haven't seen before. And so our recommended amendment for fiscal year 2022 is $1,967,347. And I'd like to break this amount out in 3 ways for you. $841,585 is for what we call at the city rebudget, which is carried forward appropriations from fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2022. Now, for this year, these rebudgets are occurring because of delays in receiving items related to supply chain issues, as well as some project delays. Additionally, we're recommending an adjustment for $981,782 for items you have already approved in the space of awarding contracts, bids, and authorizing agreements. And finally, we're recommending $143,980 in new appropriations this evening. And so we'll go fund by fund as a way to hopefully streamline this presentation. In the general fund, we're recommending an amendment of $689,597. This amendment is being funded by several sources. A Blue Sky grant and capital project transfers are funding a small portion of this amendment, while rebudget reserves and available cash reserves will fund the majority of it. The major rebudgeted items in the general fund include several large pieces of fire equipment, as well as information technology equipment and moving an information technology project between fiscal periods. The capital project transfers in the general fund will move appropriations from the capital construction fund to the general fund to accommodate expenses on the city's software modernization project, our ERP project, that are occurring in the general fund but are budgeted right now in the capital construction fund. I'd like to highlight a few items in the general fund that you have not seen before. We are recommending a $23,000 increase in the city manager's division to fund a non-benefited position to assist with the city's many environmentally related projects and assessments, which are necessary to meet the council's adopted carbon neutrality goal. The primary focus of this position will be to finalize the draft municipal emissions reduction plan and bring it to council for formal adoption. Also of note is an adjustment of $128,677 for two items in the Police Administration and Operations Division. $90,000 of this request is to migrate our existing tasers to a new model because the current model is actually being phased out by the vendor. And $38,677 of this request is to replace a patrol unit that was damaged in service. Regarding the Taser replacement project, this was requested by the police chief and recommended by the city manager. The city has used its current Taser model for over 10 years, and as I indicated, the vendor has noted that this model will be phased out. This budget request contains what Chief Stalder has represented as the most cost-effective and efficient way to migrate the city's Taser models, existing Taser models, to the new model. He believes that replacing these units at once will create administrative efficiency, as officers will have to be trained on the new models, and also creates operational efficiency in that if they have a field failure or other circumstances where officers have to interchange weapons, they have the same weapons that they're working with. And finally, in the general fund, we're recommending a reduction of $7,230 to move appropriations from fiscal year 22 to 21 for the electrical upgrades project that I mentioned in the space of presenting the 2021 amendment. In the Economic Development Fund, we're recommending an adjustment of $252,445. You've actually already approved this amount, but I'd like to point out that it's funded by interfaith project contributions and available cash reserves. In the Recreation Center, we have a new request for you of $2,400 for some additional software training that was made necessary by the departure of a key staffing member. That will be funded by available cash reserves. In the Capital Construction Fund, we're recommending a reduction of $55,300 to transfer spending authority to the general fund for expenses associated with the city's software modernization project. In the 2018 Specific Purpose Tax Fund, we're recommending an adjustment of $95,720. Part of this is offset by a private donation, which the council accepted. And of this amount, the council has not approved $5,810 for a slight overrun on the Scout Park project. Moving on to the Water Fund, We're recommending an adjustment of $502,765. That is funded mostly by rebudgets, but there are some available cash reserves that are being used for these requests. The council has not seen two items. One of those is $3,000 of rebudgets between periods for some desktop computer replacements. Those were delayed due to supply chain issues. And the second is a $30,000 adjustment for a project match for the Phase 2 restoration of hay meadows beneath the Goforth Reservoir. Ducks Unlimited was successful in obtaining a North American Wildlife Conservation Act grant to complete this project, and this $30,000 represents the city's match. In the wastewater fund, we're recommending an adjustment for $292,480, funded by available cash reserves and rebudgets. And of this adjustment, the council has not already seen a $38,362 rebudget between periods for a delayed delivery on a piece of equipment. This was not due to a supply chain issue. It really was just simply the timing was a little bit off between fiscal years. And finally, closing out in the solid waste fund, we're recommending an adjustment of $187,240, funded by rebudget reserves and available cash reserves. The council has not seen a rebudget request of $1,000 for a desktop computer replacement. And with that, I will happily open it up for questions.
Okay, council members. Let's go to Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Jen, this may be a question for you, maybe also a question for the city manager as it pertains to the city manager's request for $23,000 from the general fund. I am curious if that $23,000 is intended for a part-time non-benefited sort of some variety of assistance in our environmental policy I guess, implementation to whatever variety. And I'm really kind of curious if that is a sufficient amount of money for a position that I don't see, at least with this council, I don't foresee that workload decreasing. And I would sort of expect us to continue pushing that forward. So I don't know, because it's sort of like it's not necessarily about the budgeting component. It may be more about a question for the city manager, but if you want to take a crack at it, I'd love to hear it. So whoever wants to take that.
I will
Council,
through you.
Well,
certainly think the city
yeah,
manager.
just checking. Council, do you all feel like Councilmember Harrington's question is appropriate and on topic? I do. Okay. So let's see what we hear about that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council. This is Janine. With respect to your question, Councilor Harrington, this budget request would allow us to bring on a part-time 20-hour per week position for one contract year, roughly 12 months. And so that is how we've arrived at the $23,000 for the estimated cost of a one-year contract position, and it would be fully part-time. As Jennifer said, Darren Parkin and myself, your Natural Resources Administrator, we're really the 2 point people for administering your municipal emissions reduction plan, as well as your various other environmental objectives. And so to be candid, we kind of hit a wall a few weeks ago and realized that we really need to bring on some part-time support and someone who's really specifically focused only on these activities. For the time being, we believe 20-hour a week or a part-time position for a year will be sufficient. We've had a really great success history working with University of Wyoming Hobbs School for Environment and Natural Resources, and they've been able to work with us to really give some great high-level assistance, not only through the school, but through the folks they've educated, frankly, who've worked for us over the years. We will reevaluate, Councilor Harrington, to your question, at the end of this year, and it is entirely possible that this position, whether part-time or full-time, could be made permanent or recommended to you all to make permanent at a future date. But at this point, we're wanting to kind of explore what 20 hours part-time will accomplish and what it won't before I would feel comfortable coming back to recommend a permanent allocation of funds or a new FTE to be authorized.
Thank you, Janine. Yeah, that's great. I think both Councilor Doherty and I have watched the heavy workload, certainly through that Mountain Towns project. We've been up close to sort of how much the council is asking from you all. So I just wanted to ensure that you were really getting what you needed here. And it sounds like you are, so that's great.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. I think that was a good and timely question. Thank you, City Manager, for the breakdown about it. Other questions as we go through these components? You see anything in there? You know, I was just looking through it again as Jennifer walked us through it. You know, a lot of it was not shocking, but had been covered before. Yes, Councilmember O'Doherty.
My computer cut out just as you were talking about the decrease. I think it was Ice and Event Center, so 7,230. What's the source of the decrease?
Councilmember O'Doherty, I don't know if other folks, I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding you, like with your microphone, and I don't know if that's just me. I don't know if the staff can hear you. It looks like people are okay. I just thought I'd let you know. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jennifer. Go right ahead.
Honorable Mayor, through you to Councilor O'Doherty. The source of this decrease is really just, it's a transfer of spending authority from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 21, because the project schedule was a little bit wonky and we ended up incurring expenditure slightly in advance of the fiscal year begin date. So the council actually appropriated these funds in fiscal year 22, but they were expended in 2021. And when we say expended, we mean from an accounting standpoint, right? And so we just need to reduce 22 and add to 21. And so that's what we're doing here. And that is just, it would be, the funding source would be cash, but it's a net zero.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. Appreciate that. Other questions on the budget amendment package these years? All right, let's see if there's public comment. Does not appear to be the case. Council members, back to you. Well, we want to say thanks again for the good breakdown and the details. It kind of helps jog our memory and help us do a little bit better job of keeping track. So we do truly appreciate it and the format that you bring those to us in. So we thank you. City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote on this item?
Humby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 no's, Your Honor.
And that motion carries. And thank you, City Clerk. Council, it also made me just now think about the fact that when you have a council member join us sort of midterm and has been appointed to fill a vacancy, as Councilmember Schmeckel has too, those kinds of breakdowns and presentations might be particularly helpful because otherwise one might have no idea at all what's going on. So yet another reason that we need those kinds of reviews and breakdowns, and we do very much appreciate them. And we'll say thanks again. Okay, let's go to the next item on our agenda. Item number 17.
That would be Cumby, Mr. Mayor.
I'm looking for Councilmember Cumby, who is ready to go. Over to you.
Thank you. I move to approve first reading of original ordinance number 2034, amending chapters 13.44.010 and 13.44.030 of the Laramie
Municipal Code to regulate water rates in the city of Laramie.
Second.
Motion and a second from Vice Mayor Pierce. And I'm going to turn it over to Chief Operating Officer Brown. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilor. This item, staff has been working on updating our financial plan, looking if we needed rate increases, and we've been working with Todd Cristiano with Reptilius, who's been our rate consultant and is the owner of the model, helped us build the model for all these years. We had a work session last week, November 9th, and Todd did give a presentation on the whole water and sewer rates, went over the plan, went over our planning assumptions. We talked about our capital plan and a lot of the components that go in it. There was a couple things that council had asked us to do. One of them was, when we are presenting the rates, we wanted to look at the average. What is the average user of water? Usually it's 6 units of water is the average use. We had 2022, the rate increase of 4% requirement in 2022 is about $1.95 per month for those users. You asked to look at 2023. 2023, the average use with these rates are $1.89 per month for users, a little less than 22. I would like to turn this over to Todd Cristiano because you did ask him to do a comparative, I think, Mayor, and we had a comparative of where our rates stand with other comparative rates, and he has pulled out kind of that information for you, and he has some other slides to present, and he can go over any overviews or things also you guys would like to go over. So I'll turn it over to Todd.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you very much, Malia. And Mr. Cristiano, welcome back, and thank you. And thank you very much for following up on those things from our work session. So we're glad to have you back, and welcome. And we'll turn it over to you.
Excellent, Ms. Brown and Mayor Weaver and council members, good evening. It's good to be back. Quick summary, we did present the rates last time, and I believe one of the questions that actually came from you, Mayor Weaver, was when we looked at our comparison, you wanted to help narrow that down a little bit to utilities that are of similar size. So we've got a slide for you there that I want to show. But before I do that, we have when we had talked last week, I had mentioned that water and wastewater rates have been going up across the country. It's not just a Wyoming thing or a Laramie thing or, just certain areas of the country. And it kind of ties into our survey that we've been seeing, that we've been redoing every 2 years of just, rates continuing to increase, customers' bills continuing to increase. So I just want to show you a quick graph from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
You turned off.
Mr. Cristiano, you've accidentally muted for us.
Oh, is that better?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. You're great.
All right, there we go. Okay. So I want to jump to a slide that shows the nationwide trend in water and wastewater rates in comparison to the CPI, or general inflation. And it's not. There we go. So this is a quick chart we share with a lot of our clients and councils. Water and wastewater rates have just been going up at a tremendous clip ever since 2008. And a lot of that's due to the fact that the federal money available to utilities back in the 70s, all those facilities are wearing out and need to be replaced, and that's part of it. So no utility is immune to revenue adjustments. And looking at what we presented for the city of Laramie of 4% on the water and wastewater is certainly below this trend that we're seeing nationwide. So I just wanted to point that out as we look at this survey. So I believe that last time we had looked at our survey of different utilities across the U.S. that were actually considered, Class C or smaller utilities from the Raftellus 2021 rate survey. So what we did is the city of Laramie is within that grouping of Group C, and we looked at, well, where does Laramie fall in terms of typical bills for a Class C utility? And this is the graph here we showed last week. And you can see on the right here the where they fall in the survey of 117 that we pulled. And, you know, they're slightly above the average for these two different levels. And these two levels of 5 CCF or 500 cubic feet and 1,000 cubic feet here is the survey numbers we use. I know the average usage is 6,000 for the utility. So they're slightly above average in these two examples. And the request came of, well, you know, we have, there's 117 utilities, less than 20 MGD is a wide swath of utilities. So we wanted to kind of narrow that down. Could we look at a smaller group that might be more representative size-wise in terms of water produced in gallons per day? So what we did was put together this new graph here. And we looked at Class C utilities, the same group, but we narrowed it down between 2 and 6. Laramie's around 4 MGE, and we wanted to make sure we got enough customers or enough other utilities to have some sort of good comparison. And there's not much change in the position of where Laramie falls. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. So not only does it compare well against some of the other Class C utilities of the smaller C utilities, but it also fares well with some of the larger C utilities that might be having some bigger issues. So it's fairly consistent. Nothing jumped out at us here with these results. But this was the request, and so this is the results of what we found from the survey. One thing I'm not sure I pointed out last time is that the rates other than Laramie's here are 2020 or possibly 2019 rates, because we did need some time to aggregate all the data and publish the manual and all that. So the minimum, the average, and the highest rates, those rates are probably about a year old or so. So we're actually comparing against 2021 rates, 2022 rates against these maybe older rates. So there might be a percentage increase on some of those other utilities, making Laramie look a little more favorable than what it might show in this chart. So that's really the new information we have. Ms. Brown went over the changes in the bills for the typical bills of 6,000 gallons. We talked about the capital improvement program and the robust repair and replacement program that you have on water and sewer that generate these needs for these revenue adjustments. And that's what I'm bringing back tonight, and I can stand by with questions and providing any additional information that might be needed.
Mr. Cristiano, thank you very much. And of course, I do recall the questions and the requests that I brought forward about this topic from the last week, and I appreciate you very much pulling this data together for us. And as I think we touched on last week, the reason that's important for us is because it's one of the things that, as the council members, were frequently asked about when we get on this topic of water rates. And I don't mind saying now in our meeting that there's often a perception that Laramie has disproportionately high water rates. And I think it's really good for us to be able to have that sort of aggregated data to look at and say, well, no, that's not really accurate. Mm-hmm. It might be accurate to say that there could be slightly above average as a level of comparison, but to say that they're, disproportionately higher than other comparator municipalities, it's just not accurate. Mm-hmm. And it's important for us to be able to have that information. One of the reasons I asked you to pull that together and make it a little more specific for comparisons that might be a little bit more relatable.
Right.
And so I appreciate very much your having done that. I'd like to go over to Councilmember Doherty.
When you say the rank, are you going from lowest to highest? So if we're 7, are we the 7th from the lowest or 7th from the highest? Thanks.
I believe that's 7th of the highest. Elise is here tonight. She helped put this together. I'm going to quickly defer to Elise. If you could tell me, Elise, make sure I'm saying that correctly, that we're 24 being the highest.
That
welcome, Elise.
Is hello. Well, thank you. Yeah, so it's the 9th highest out of 24. So number 24 would have been the lowest.
Okay. Okay.
So about 3 points from the median.
Yes. I believe that would be it.
Got to say, council members, it not strike me as a shockingly high place for Laramie water rates to be. Other questions for Mr. Cristiano, members of the city staff, or at least, yeah, Councilmember Somerville. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Cristiano, for coming back again so soon. And the question I want to ask is more of for public benefit and discussion, because I've had some constituents ask me about how the federal infrastructure package in the last week, whether Laramie can take advantage of that. Would you mind just maybe recapping what you told us last week in terms of how Laramie might be able to access some of the infrastructure money and how that would potentially affect rates and capital plans?
Well, thank you. Well, as a firm, we're still learning a lot. And I think Ms. Brown actually had some more specifics on it for the state of Wyoming. We know that the funds will be available, but how it's doled out to the states and how the states hand it out to the different utilities is going to vary. It's probably going to go through the state revolving loan funds and Clean Water Drinking Act funds as well. But in terms of Wyoming, I don't have any specifics. I don't know, Ms. Brown, if you have any more information since last week. Lots been happening just over the past week with that.
Yes, Mayor, and through Councilor Summers, through you, Mayor. As I talked about last week, I think that it's going to go through the slip board. We do have. I think Brooks put a whole lot of on the intended use plan, so we can have access to some of these monies. I think that the road structure, because you can't have roads also, that might have to be looked at and how that works. But for the water and wastewater, we have plenty of on the intended use to use these monies. It's just, I just don't see it happening for these projects in 22, 23. I believe that most of the projects will hit in 24 and we'll apply for it in 24. It might hit some in 23, but I think that, we did talk about some of the projects that potentially we could use even on Monday with engineering and public works. We're already going, hey, let's do this. We have like lots of ideas in our capital plan to help us offset and have really reduction in future rate increases for these items. And I think it's exciting that hopefully we just don't know how much we're going to get yet. We have to wait for the state and have some rules that see what they want us to do.
Ms. Mayor, if I can, just a follow-up, I just wanted to say thank you for all of the information. And I know that this will be coming back to council probably on a semi-regular basis for a while as that money gets doled out. And I just want to make sure the public is aware that we certainly are looking at it and trying to take advantage of it to help support our utilities.
Council Member Somerville, I think that's very well said indeed, that of course, as those federal dollars work their way through the process and into the state and then into the individual communities, when and where they can be used to try to keep rates low and costs down for local ratepayers, we're going to do that. Are there other questions? I've got another one for Mr. Cristiano, but I want to let other people go if they haven't yet. Other questions? And yes, Councilmember Schmeckel, you got it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious if these comparator communities, if there is a difference in pricing between warm weather communities and colder weather communities, and if there's a trend where colder weather communities typically cost more because of the weather situations, things like that, if that's a factor in some of our pricing?
Counselor, that's a good question, and I would say there is some variability in the bills based on the various weather types where the utilities are and how their rate structures are structured. Some might have a tiered structure for conservation and higher water use areas when there's a water scarcity issue. Other communities might have a declining block structure, meaning as you use more, you pay less. So I think there is a weather component to the rate structure. Whether they've gone scientific enough to design a rate structure that ties directly to some sort of average weather pattern, that I couldn't tell you, but the rate structures, I'm sure, have some component of weather or precipitation habits built in into them, but I couldn't tell you how they would have come up with those. And so whether it's more expensive to operate in cold weather or warm weather, again, I think it just depends. I can see that in warmer weather, in some areas, it might be more costly to operate than in colder climates, just as much as you have different elevations in certain communities. There's always a number of factors that come into play there. So it's difficult to say.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmeckel. Other questions? I'd like to see if we could go back to that to the slide that a couple of slides ago that tracked with CPI and the costs of infrastructure. Yeah, and the reason I wanted to look at this slide again and ask Todd another question was, I believe you outlined a couple of reasons for this sort of spike as these two lines begin to diverge a little bit. And one of those that I think I heard you say was it happened to time with pretty closely with aging infrastructure that was put in with a considerable amount of federal investment in the 70s, and then of course that would be about the timeline that a lot of that stuff would really need to be replaced and hit replacement as a necessity. Is that pretty much at least a pretty accurate paraphrasing of what you told us there?
Yes, that's the general consensus. When we've looked at utilities over the years, we've kind of seen, we look at their asset listing, and you can kind of see when some of those assets that were donated or granted are coming off, and now they're having to reinvest. So that's been going on for some time. It's exacerbated the issue, plus just cost increasing in general. Construction cost increasing in general, too, is another factor.
I appreciate that. So I have a second part of this question, and that's for the city manager. And give her a second so we're not catching her off guard. And my second part of this question is based on what Mr. Cristiano told us earlier in the presentation and just reaffirmed for me right now. City manager, it seems to me that the city of Laramie's launching a lot of reinvestment into water infrastructure after a period of sort of delayed maintenance that in my opinion went on longer than it should have, started to be looked at and rectified at right around that 08, 07, 08 timeline as well. And I recall charts that you have shown and shared with the council in the past that tracked both the need to, frankly, have breakage repairs on a regular basis, and then when the city started to invest in a more holistic and systematic infrastructure repair program. And I think that, unfortunately for us as a city, happens to track with, the red line here. And I wonder if you might weigh in on that for me a little bit. Is that a pretty accurate recollection, at least in as far as the timelines go, city manager?
Mayor, I think you are quite accurate, actually. I think our rate adjustments made in, I want to say, 2009, 10, that, as we all recall as a community, were fairly significant. They really do seem to trend similarly to this national chart of costs that we're looking at. And I'll share with you, I always like to share this story because it's a success story. We were seeing, leading up to those rate increases in 2009-10, we had seen in the decade preceding that, our breaks in the system, line breaks, line failures, just ramping up. And of course, that is a picture of infrastructure that's aged and beginning to fail. It's at the end of its useful life. I don't have the slide to share with you this evening, but I could certainly prepare that for second reading of our line breaks or failures in our water and our wastewater system. Since we started making that significant investment in around 2010, it's really dropped notably. We were, if I remember correctly, almost up to like on average 130 line breaks a year, 120, something like that. And it's down significantly, well below 100 at this time. So I can't attest to whether or not we made significant investments in our infrastructure in the 70s, as you've heard tonight, but it does seem to really parallel this chart. And as you said, we had deferred maintenance and line replacement and rehabilitation for a couple of decades through the 90s and 80s, as did many utilities in Wyoming, for all the obvious reasons that we understand about boom and bust cycles. So it was long overdue to make that investment as a community into our infrastructure.
I really appreciate that, City Manager, and the reason I wanted to go over that again with Mr. Cristiano and then ask that question of you is it seems to me that there's some data here that's useful and that would help folks in our community have a good and complete picture about rate increases over the last 10 years or so. And I see a lot of good information here that could be put together in an information sheet or an infographic that could be available or that could be on file somewhere for folks that might want to look at it. I might defer to Councilmember Harrington about how best to tie those things together in a piece of graphic design for an infographic. But I think there are sections and items of information here that are closely related to our program of infrastructure replacement and rate increases. And I just think those things are helpful for people. So I appreciate those answers on all of those last couple of questions. Other questions for staff or guests? All right, let's see if there's a public comment on this item. Did I miss anyone's hand? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say
with
the
the
comments
public
already, I wanted to make a comment.
Okay, do you want to go to the public and then we'll go back to the council for comments? Councilmember Schuster, will that work for you?
Yes.
All right, see if we have public comment on this item. It does not appear that we do. Councilmember Schuster, it's back to you.
Well, thank you. As one of the council, a few council people that were back here when that happened, we had some rate increases because we did a lot of deferred maintenance. Some of our rate increases were almost at 20%. The group had recommended higher than that, but we had found some grants and other stuff. But we have went up a lot since that had happened. So most of our deferred maintenance has been taken care of. Also, our city manager was quite accurate. I remember a year of, I believe, 145 breaks in 1 year on water lines out there where you actually felt really bad because it seems like most of our breaks happen when we're below freezing. So it's always just a fun time to fix a water line break when you're soaking wet and freezing at the same time. A lot of things the public doesn't know. We have lost some of our biggest suppliers or purchasers of our water. South Laramie Water District has put in their own well into the aquifer. University of Wyoming has put in a well and 2 unsuccessful wells into our aquifer because they didn't want to pay for golf course water anymore. So we have lost some of our largest customers now, and it's going to come back on them for other people doing this. So water is one of the most valuable commodities of a city anymore. Having enough water for your city for now and in the future is huge. Cheyenne is looking for new water sources, and probably every single city in Colorado is probably eyeing everybody's water sources in a several 100-mile range. So we have to be really careful on our water. We need to get new sources, and we want to have it so that in 20 years, people look back and go, wow, I'm glad they did that 20 years ago. Because there are going to be a lot of cities that are going to be looking for water from any other state they can grab it from. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. I think that's all very well said indeed, and I agree with all of it, from the discussion of the irrigation problems that we've dealt with at the university recently, and then also the comments in general. Just ask communities that don't have enough water for the growth that they're trying to manage, how they're dealing with that issue. I think that's, as I said, very well put. Do we have any other questions or comments here while we still have our guest rate consultants here before we move on? Would like to thank you both, Mr. Cristiano, and I think, let me see if I remember this from last time, Mr. Pansky, for being here. And we appreciate the work that you've done for us and the follow-up work that you did for us. And I hope you can kind of see why this council might be interested in those things. It's because we'd like to pull that information together to help people understand what exactly our rate program is here, to both combat misperceptions and maybe misinformation, and really just kind of let people know where those rates stand in comparison to other cities that are like Laramie. So we really appreciate that work that you did for us on that.
Thank you.
And the overall.
Mayor Weaver, point of clarification. The sewer ordinance is up next. I don't have any new information to present then, so I can ask Ms. Brown. We can stay on for that if you'd like.
You might do that just in case a question comes around that we need you to ask. So we'll get into it. We'll get into it. That's just, I kind of have this little habit of just really making sure people know that they're welcome here and we're glad they're here as we go through these things. So no worries there.
Thank you.
Do we have any other? You bet. And you are. And we're glad to have you here. Any other comments on this topic before we go to a vote, council members? All right. Why don't we do that, City Clerk? Roll call vote.
Gabriel.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Schmickel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. Council members, who is our member introducing the next item number 18? Chair is worthless and cannot remember.
That'd be
Councilmember Schmeckel.
Yes.
Yes, sir. You have the floor.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve first reading of original ordinance number 2035, amending chapter 13.48 of the Laramie Municipal Code to regulate wastewater rates in the city of Laramie.
Second.
There's a motion and a second from Councilmember O'Doherty. Thank you both, council members, and we'll take it over to Malia Brown.
Thanks, Mayor. This is kind of just a reiteration of the water ordinance. We had, once again, a work session last week. We went through the capital plan and the assumptions that went into that plan. And based on all the assumptions and things that we need, Raftilius is recommending a 4% revenue requirement in the wastewater fund for 22 and 23. Based on the average use for residential is based on low quarter consumption, or low quarter consumption is about 4,000 gallon consumption. The rate that the average user would have in 22 was $1.23 per month, and in 23 was $1.24 per month. So it's about the same rate per in 22 and 23. So I also Todd actually went over your information for water and sewer on that already. So that was presented. So if you have any questions for Todd or I, we'd be happy to hear about it, or if you want to go over any more information.
Thank you very much. Council members, you've kind of heard it already, and it's been recapped pretty well for us just now. But if there's any questions that are maybe specific to this wastewater aspect of it, although I think we kind of got a holistic rundown on it already. I see a lot of hands popping up or eager expressions. Let's see if there's a public comment on this topic. I don't see one. Oh, yes, Councilmember O'Doherty, thank you.
I just have a comment. I want to appreciate that our sanitary sewer workers know that it's not safe to work now, and I'm really glad that we're going to stay on top of our sanitary sewers, because every one of these breaks is a lot of staff time. They happen at the worst times, so that it's overtime charges and things. So I'm really in support of this ordinance. Thank you.
That's a really good point, Councilmember O'Doherty. And you know, Todd and Elise, I don't know if you guys were paying attention to the earlier part of our meeting, but we actually had a little bit of a maintenance issue, wastewater maintenance issue happening here in the city of Laramie right now that our public works people. So you know, maybe that's a well-timed thing. That, you know, it seems to me, and I've said this before over the years as a member of the council here, that this type of maintenance has to be ongoing, because if we go back to the approach that we've used before, and Councilmember Schuster alluded to this, and we've talked about it a little bit, where you just you know, defer things and sort of patch as you go, it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable from a financial perspective, and it's unsustainable from a just delivering city services to the community perspective. You just can't do it. You have to constantly and continuously maintain it, and take a look at your rates as we go along. So once again, we do appreciate your work, and appreciate the way that you presented that to us and explained it to us. Other comments or questions from the council about this? All right. And we've checked for public comment on this, so I'll go to the city clerk and ask for a roll call vote.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. And that takes us through those items. And it's 8:37, and we have another item on the regular agenda. Council members, if I could, I'd like you to entertain maybe just taking a very short break, maybe 3 or 4 minutes here. Is everyone amenable to that? Quick break? Okay. See you back in about 4 or 5 minutes. And thanks. Yeah, Mr. Cristiano, thanks for being here. Appreciate that. Good to see you again, and take care of yourself. You too, Elise. Thank you. everybody for being willing to take a little break. I think that's good for us. Okay. City Clerk, are we ready to go? Everything back and as it needs to be? All right. Mr. Teeny's with us. Okay. So that's going to take us now, council members, as we come out of our recess back into the meeting. We're going to go to item number 19. And I, of course, don't know who had volunteered.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. I move to approve
You have the floor.
original.
Yep.
I move to approve original ordinance 2036, amending sections 15.10, 15.12, and 15.14 as recommended by the Planning Commission on first reading, in accordance with findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second from Councilmember O'Doherty. Thank you both. And Mr. Teeney, over to you for the background on the item.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. As it was read in the motion, we have a request to amend multiple sections within Laramie Municipal Code related to future housing changes. If you recall, a couple meetings ago, we completed housing changes related to parking standards. And the changes that we're going to be discussing this evening are kind of that second component or second portion of those changes that we presented in multiple work sessions to both Planning Commission and to Council. And these changes, to really summarize for you, are related to the dimensional standards. These are the things that control how large lots are and setbacks and lot sizes, dimensions, widths of lots, with the hope and intent that with these changes we can allow for alternative housing styles to be built in our community. And so, first off, what I kind of want to do with council is just kind of remind you kind of like where we're at in the process, big picture. As I mentioned, we've had a few work sessions over the last year related to these housing changes that we were going to be proposing. And if you remember, these changes are coming out of work that the council did specifically related to the Thrive Laramie housing study, as well as the housing code audit that was part of that housing study, our Thrive Economic Development Plan, and really started with guidance coming from the 2015 housing study that was completed. And if you recall, especially through the Thrive housing study, which was focused on how do we improve housing choice and housing availability in our community, recommendations were made through that plan through consultants that were hired by the city of Laramie to help provide guidance on where in our codes we may be able to make changes to help our housing. And so one of those things that we did look at was parking, which I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. We've gone through that process. And the second part was largely related to the dimensional standards and standards in terms of how lots are shaped and how big they are. And through that process, one of the things that we noted is by potentially making changes related to lot sizes, dimensional standards, setbacks, we were able to provide for the opportunity within our community for subdivisions to be built that allowed for the housing types that the public was asking for. And in our staff report, we had done some workshop work with developers and people from our community about what type of housing they wanted to see. And, no surprise, definitely wanted to still see that normal single family housing style. But really what we saw was a broad range of a desire to see things like cottages and bungalows, smaller houses, single family homes, accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, so smaller, multifamily buildings, as well as kind of some of those, townhome and condo situations. And so when we heard that, we had to really kind of look at what our codes currently allowed and whether our current codes would allow for this type of development or more the type of development that we've traditionally seen in Laramie. And so through those recommendations of not only the housing action plan, and then ultimately that code audit, which specifically looks at our code and the changes that possibly could be made, we started really focusing in on the changes that we're recommending here tonight. And so what I kind of want to direct you to is to the actual changes that we're going to be discussing. And so in your staff report, we kind of broke down what changes we're proposing, and really the large majority of the changes are found in what we call our dimensional requirements, or it's a table that's found in the code. This table is what it's kind of a quick glance or a one-stop look within our code, so that you can find out how big a lot needs to be, how wide a lot needs to be, what your setbacks are, how tall a building can be. And the changes that we're proposing are reductions in lot sizes. What this will allow is it will allow within our community for smaller lots to be platted and developed, so that homes can be built on smaller lots, reducing the total cost of those homes so that more affordable housing can be built. And what you'll see in both the R2, the R2M, and the R3 zoning districts are changes that do a couple different things. So the first thing I want to point out is lot size. Currently under our codes, we have a minimum lot size per principal building. What we're doing there is we're just simply reducing it down to a minimum lot size. In the R2 zoning district, for instance, we're going from 6,000 square feet to 2,500 square feet. Same in the R2M zoning district. However, the current code allows for 4,800 square foot lot. And then in the R3 zoning district, we're making a reduction down from 6,000 square feet to 2,000 square feet. This allows for simply smaller lots, which allows for developers to build smaller product if they desire. We also are reducing the lot square footage per unit. What this does is it allows for the actual zoning districts in which we're talking about to have the density in which the zoning district is intended to permit. So for instance, I'd point you towards the R2 zoning district. Currently under the R2 zoning district, the minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. Under current code, you have to have 3,500 square feet per unit on that lot. What that means is that even a code compliant R2 zoned property, which is supposed to allow for 4 units, only allows for 2 units. This was identified as a major problem as we were reviewing our code, so that we could allow for the actual appropriate density in the zoning districts that already exist. And so what this does, these changes, whether it's the R2, the R2M, or the R3 zoning district, is it allows for lots to actually have density that they were intended upon in the zoning district. And so another example might be in the R3 zoning district. You may have to have at least a 2,000 square foot lot, but if you want, let's say 5 units, you still have to have that 1,000 square foot per unit, so 5,000 total square feet. Now that's just the minimum lot size. This does not mean that the properties still don't have to comply with things like parking, landscaping, access requirements, or any of the other requirements like setbacks, for instance, that any other property would. So it doesn't change any of that. The other thing that I would note is the kind of within this table is changes to the minimum lot width. Overall, what you see is a reduction to a simple minimum lot width of 20 feet. This allows for a more wide variety of development patterns, especially more connected type housing on narrower lots. Which is allowed in, like, for instance, the R2, R2M, and R3 zoning districts. It doesn't require really wide lots, which usually is what drives costs up, because the infrastructure associated with wider lots is more difficult to build and obviously normally gets passed on to the actual home price or land value as those properties develop. The last thing I kind of want to point out is a reduction of the front setbacks. When we start looking at reduced lot sizes, we really have to start thinking about the fact that a 25-foot front setback or even a larger front setback really starts to use up a large majority of the property. And because it's using up a large majority of the property, by reducing the setbacks, we allow for the buildings to be pushed more towards the front of the property, which then, even if we have a house on that property, we can still provide for property owners to have backyards or places for garages or sheds or things like that. Whereas under the way the current code is situated, it really wouldn't allow for that, and it would make, even if the changes were to occur, it's still pretty difficult to accommodate things like sheds or a rear loading garage or something to that order. I'll point out, we are not changing any of the single family residential zoning district standards. There's absolutely no changes to any of that. This is only changes where we can allow for some sort of multifamily development. Also, too, what I want to point out is this is still not changing the total density on the lots in which is permitted within each zoning district. Remember, in the R2 and the R2M zoning district, there are only 4 units per building per lot, okay? Only in the R3 zoning district are larger, more than 4 unit type buildings allowed, or more than that many units allowed on those lots. And so this doesn't change the overall density in terms of on a lot. It does increase the density in terms of the square footage per lot, but not in terms of how big the buildings could be. For instance, the R2 zoning district today can only be a 4-plex, and in the future can only be a 4-plex. And so the R3 zoning district can have larger buildings, same in the future if these changes were to be made. The next thing I kind of want to direct you to is some other changes that we noted that would need to be addressed, as these changes in the table that we presented need to be looked at essentially because they affect a few other sections in code. And those are listed kind of below the table. There's a series of them that are related to either A, references already in code. So for instance, one of the very first ones that you'll see, it's actually on page 5 of your staff report. There was an additional reference related to lot width. It was just referencing the table. If we're making a modification.
Mr. C, I wonder if maybe this might be, as we get into this part of your background, if we might pull that up on the main screen so that people can kind of follow along as you go through what you're speaking to. City Clerk, can we get that up? I apologize for the interruption.
That's fine. Nancy, would you like me to bring it up on my screen so I can do it and then just give me permission?
You can do it either way, Derek. I'll go ahead and give you permissions, but I have it up on mine too.
If you have it up, then that's fine. I don't have mine up quite yet. So if you want to bring yours up, that'd be fine.
Mr. Cheney, City Clerk, I appreciate that. That just seems like it can kind of help us as we track through these, I think. City Clerk, you were
Perfect.
raising your hand, I'm sorry.
We're good.
All right,
you, Mayor.
Nancy, thank you.
Okay.
So the first bullet there is what I was mentioning. This section was just a reference of essentially we're just deleting a duplicate section related to lot widths. If it's in the table and it really wasn't needed before and doesn't need to be there now. The second bullet there, which is related to section 1512.010B 1FI, is related to corner lots. And in that section there, we just start noting that there's a consistent setback when we change the setbacks related to that 5-foot change. The third bullet point there is related to townhouse structures. And on this one here, what we're talking about is essentially some redundant language, but then also that it just makes it clear with a townhouse structure that you can use the new width requirement, which references the old width requirement within this section. Nancy, if you want to scroll down kind of to the next page there you go. This next bullet point related to size and quantity is specifically related to accessory buildings. Under these changes, with the possibility now that instead of someone just being allowed to build, let's say, a fourplex, they could build 4 small bungalows on a property and still have the same units, but just in a different development pattern. We had to recognize that there could be multiple principal buildings on a property, and so we just wanted to note that. And this section references that, you know, they can still put a shed or a garage on the property, but it's then dictated by like the tallest building or the largest building on the property, which is how we would kind of look at that today even. Next section is related to garages. We just note that because of the setback change to the front, we want to ensure that an attached garage can still be situated on a property in those R2, R2M, and R3 zoning districts. So by removing that, we just know that it'll be at 5 feet, which is allowed under this section here of code. If you go down to the next, there you go. All this section and all this changes is simply making the 5 foot match up with the new recommended setback change. And then this kind of last bullet point, which kind of spills onto the last page, is really related to the requirement that if we were to see multiple principal buildings on a lot, that those lots would need to be properly landscaped so that all the units had landscaped yards in the front of those properties, which is what our requirement is today, which is that the front yards be landscaped, and it doesn't apply to rear yards. So this kind of clears that up to ensure that they all have access to the street and have a logical way to access that public way at the front of the property. So really, with those changes that we found and that were kind of that I addressed in the table above, these were the only sections that we wanted to modify to make sure that they matched up with the table. We didn't want to modify anything beyond that because we really wanted to focus on just these dimensional standards. And so, you know, when we start to look at these, what I would say is that yes, this will allow for smaller lots. This will allow for a pattern of development that may seem a little bit different. It's definitely different than the new development that we do see. So the current, like, I'm going to say more recent subdivisions, but this pattern of development is not unique to Laramie. This pattern of development is what we see in a lot of our historical neighborhoods already. Smaller lots that have been divided that, you know, have 2 corner lots on a small property, maybe in the tree area or the west side. And what the desire is to allow for that type of housing to continue to occur. Under our current code, really developers, when they're platting new subdivisions, are fairly restricted to these larger lots, which doesn't provide a mixture of housing types. And so with these changes, that's what was identified through that process. And so by making these changes, this does at least open that door for that option. Once again, though, this doesn't mean that everybody is going to do this. You know, we will still see developers who may want to provide kind of what I would call your standard lot or your typical residential single family twin home lot that you see built today. But what this does do is provide for that opportunity for some of those smaller units or more creative approaches to properties that might be more difficult to develop right now because of the way how big the lot is, or other constraints related to the lot. And so with that, what I would note is just similar to all ordinances and processes that we do, we still do public notice. The Planning Commission considered this at their last meeting. They did recommend approval of this as presented to you, to the council this evening. We also have sent this item forward to the Laramie Boomerang in our normal legal ad process. So this is notified not only for the Planning Commission, but will be done for City Council's public hearing, which is normal for an ordinance. I would also point out that during this process, we received public comment. In your packet of materials, you'll see multiple public comments related to this item, supporting, mostly all in support of this item. You'll see we did receive one public comment yesterday, from Brett Glass, and that was provided to council as well. That comment was not in support of these changes. Additionally, we've communicated these changes to the CDLC committee. That's a Community Development Liaison Committee, which is a portion of the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance. That group looked at these changes and supports these changes as well as a way to improve housing within our community, which, as you've heard from not only LCDA, but also city staff, that housing is a large economic development burden that we continue to see within our community. And we hope that this provides some additional opportunities to address that. And so with that, what I would say is I'd be open to questions, explanation regarding the changes, or really anything else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cheney. And yes, I did have Councilor O'Doherty first up. She had raised her hand. So I'm going to go to Councilmember O'Doherty.
Thank you. I noticed there's no change in the setback from side to side. That was one of the complaints raised, that we're going to be starting fires, but we would still abide by our fire code, I believe, and need like 1 hour walls for things that are with a certain distance. But the side setbacks are not, there's no proposed change in side setbacks that I can see. Is that correct?
Mayor, Council, that's correct. There's no changes to side yard setbacks, so those would remain 5 feet.
Or back, and none in the rear.
Yeah, the rear also remains the same at 5 feet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. Other questions? Mr. Cheney from the council. I would note that we do have some members of the public that have been waiting for some time, but of course I want to go through council. Yes, Councilmember Somerville. Sorry, I got you there in the corner.
Thank you, Mayor. No worries. Mr. T, I was wondering if you can refresh my memory of why we are only targeting R2, R2M, and R3, and why we're not including R1 in these lot reduction sizes.
Mayor, Council, that's a great question. So during the Thrive housing process, one of the things that we took a look at was where really should we focus our efforts on so that we could make the most substantial changes to our housing market. And really the reality is we're not going to make large strides in our community with single family housing. 1 unit per lot doesn't gain us the housing and the housing types that we need in our community completely. And so what we continually heard through the process was that anytime someone was doing something other than a single family type development is where they ran into concerns with density or setbacks or lot sizes or the ability to get the right number of units to make projects work. And so early on during the Thrive process, we kind of looked at where can we get the most bang for our buck. And it was really looking and focusing on those R2, R2M, and R3 zoning districts, which is where you can have density, which is where you can get more units and more people. I would say that in the future, probably our single family zoning districts are going to need to be on the table. I think that that's going to be a future discussion for staff and for council as to how do we then make changes within those districts now to possibly either reflect successes that we see with future changes in these other zoning districts, or what do we actually want to see within these single family zoning districts. I've got some ideas, but I think that's maybe another conversation for another meeting. But you're right. I mean, I don't think by any means this means that they're off the table, but I think it's trying to break this up into a little bit more bite-sized pieces. And with the Thrive plan, that's really what we focused on to start off with. So that's really the reason why.
Follow up, Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, and this ties a little bit into my second question, which is more of a overall arching policy question. Is so if we're trying to encourage development in these specific zoning districts, one thing you'll notice on the map is these are areas, with the exception of the tree area, where we don't have access to public transportation. These aren't walking districts. You know, these are a little bit farther out. So I wonder if you could enlighten us a little bit in terms of what discussions you've had about in terms of city services, access to parks, all of those, that type of analysis that you've done with the idea that we're going to concentrate more development in these areas.
Yeah. So here's the first thing that I would say is if you take a look at the city of Laramie's like zoning map and where these districts lie, our single family zoning districts are really on the periphery of our community. The core of our community, pretty much everything around the University of Wyoming campus, kind of north 9th Street, everything west of 9th Street, south, going south on 9th Street and west of 9th Street. All of that is either R2 and R3 zoning district. For Laramie, I would say that's probably our more centrally located geographically to our community. It is probably closer to services than some of our areas, like think 45th Street or near like North 30th Street and things like that. You've got other R2 and R3 zoning districts that are kind of located on the west side. I think we've had discussions about those over the last few meetings. I'd say probably our most remote or more geographically distanced R2 and R3 zoning is in West Laramie, to be honest. And so, you know, when we start looking at like services and things, first, let me touch on public transportation. You know, we don't have a true public transportation system within our community. We have access to the university's system, which provides limited transportation. We have things like the bird scooters and things, which doesn't solve the problem. You know, it only provides a little, you know, aided component maybe for some people. So, you know, as a community, we're probably going to continue to struggle with that public transportation piece, right? Like until we really start to achieve more dense areas that it makes sense to bring public transportation into, both fiscally, but also for ridership purposes. When you start looking at like parks and things, you know, overall, our core community is very, is well versed, at least in the parks that we have. Actually, where some of our poorer park service areas are located more along the periphery of our community, kind of, I'm going to say north and east of our community and due north of our community. I would say probably the larger impact that we have for lack of parks facilities is for our community members that are in our R2 and R3 zoning district, like North 9th Street, north of Harney Street, probably in that area when you look at our park service areas. And then also there is some limited, I would say, as you get much further south, like way south 15th Street, potentially down there, there's some limited park. You only have Undine kind of in that area. So, so there's definitely, you know, some of those things that we're going to see. Also, too, though, the density increases that we're probably going to see are not going to largely impact our parks in a detrimental fashion, in a rapid fashion. You know, as we continue to build out new parks within our system, I mean, those are the things that we try to take into account. And so with the Parks and Rec plan that we have currently, we've projected population growth in these areas to try to anticipate that we could see changes. We probably would see density, you know, increases, even without changes like this potentially to our code. So.
Councilmember Somerville, follow up on.
I have lots of follow-ups and lots of other questions, but I'm going to stop for now. I'll let somebody else go. Thank you.
All right, I do have other council members, but I hope they'll allow me just a little bit of a tack on to Councilmember Somerville's questions here, Mr. Cheney, because I think you can answer it pretty quickly. Can you ballpark the percentage in terms of zoning in Laramie that is R1?
No, Mayor, no. I mean, I could run those numbers. It's not, I don't have it off the top of my head, though. I don't.
All right. I'd like to see that at some point.
All right. I could,
Gabriel?
Yeah, we could break that down for you.
I think that would be useful for this discussion. Councilmember Gabriel, thank you for waiting.
You bet. Thanks, Mayor. Derek, I really like those units on Reynolds Street by Indian Paintbrush, the duplexes and fourplexes. I'm just curious, with this change, is that somewhat similar type that would be allowed in other parts of town? Because that just seems like it makes a lot of sense when you're trying to increase housing in the city.
Mayor, Council, yeah, I mean, I think the units that you see there today are allowed under our code today, right? So, but what I think what I would emphasize is that what you're gonna, through these potential changes, what you will see is more options for housing like that type. But also more creative styles than the housing that you see there. Some of those houses, you know, like the stuff that's over by Indian Paintbrush, like you mentioned, they're still actually on fairly large lots. There's still actually quite large properties still, and what we've historically heard is because of land costs being so high, if they can build something on potentially a smaller lot, they may be able to provide a very similar product, but at a reduced cost because they're reducing that initial land investment on their project. And so I think you will see more of those types of product. I think, like I said, too, you're going to see more creative approaches to our development. With these changes, it will allow for, instead of someone just building, for instance, like a fourplex on a property, they may be able to build two smaller duplexes, which may be more compatible with the neighborhood and maybe more what, let's say, the public is looking for, maybe those property owners are looking for. So it'll just allow for more flexibility within the code is what it's opening the door for.
And then you also talked about some bungalows, which are a lot smaller. Presently, is that not allowed?
Mayor, Council, the big prohibiting issue and why we aren't seeing that type of development right now is you can build a very small house right now, but under our current code, you still have to meet those minimum lot sizes per principal building, which is really inefficient. And very costly for the property owner to build a really small house on a big property or a big lot, you know? And so, for instance, like if you wanted to build a small 800 square foot, you know, bungalow or small, you know, unit on a 6,000 square foot lot, that's a big little house on a big property, right? These code changes will really open that door to allow for people to say, oh yeah, if we want to build a smaller development type product for people, we can build them on smaller lots, which still allows those people to own those homes, own the property that they are buying, invest, you know, have some investment into it, and not necessarily own a 2,000 square foot home or on a 8,000 square foot lot. And so what it does is it opens that door for that lower entry point, but also opens the door for housing types that right now maybe you can't get in, and maybe you're a young professional that wants just something less to maintain, or a senior who's looking to downsize. It's lot size prohibits that because you still have to make your money on your investment and on the business side of things, and so this then provides that opportunity.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it, Derek.
Other questions for Mr. Keeney? Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you. Derek, you've mentioned, or you've hinted at smaller bungalows and smaller size homes. How close are we to potentially, you know, with this potential change, having a tiny home community? Or is that one of those topics that you said would be similar to changes if we made changes into an R1? Would that be a whole nother issue, or does part of this encompass potential tiny home developments?
Mayor, council, so here's what I would say to that is, I think some things that we hear when we hear like a tiny home community is what we're really talking about is the people that are like building small, you know, little homes on trailers and bringing them into like, I'm going to call it like a mobile home park. Okay. However, on the other side of things, which I think is what maybe you're asking about, is a community where there is I'm going to say a planned area where smaller homes are built in a fashion that, you know, feels like a neighborhood, maybe has some amenities. That's what this code will allow. Right now, our code doesn't really allow for that, because what happens is, for instance, in a zoning district where you can have multiple units, so let's say, let's say 20 small little houses, right? You have to be in a zoning district that allows for multiple units, or you have to be in a zoning district that you're making lots that are 6,000 square feet in size. And like I mentioned to Member Gabriel a moment ago with his question, building a small, let's say 800 to a 1,000 square foot home on a 6,000 square foot lot is not economical from a development perspective. You just can't afford that. It doesn't work. The numbers don't work. By reducing lot sizes, what it does is it allows for someone to develop or plat small lots for smaller houses to create these small home communities throughout our city if someone wants to. And because like right now, our requirements don't restrict housing size. There are some basic building code requirements that relate to housing size, but within our zoning code, we allow people to build small houses already. People can go out today and build a very small house in an R1 zoning district, but once again, it's just not economical. The land costs too much to probably put a really small house on it. And so this will, to kind of roundaboutly answer your question, it will allow for this type of development, which we've heard from the community people do want to see. They want to have that as potentially as an option where they can, you know, buy a house in a community like that and have I'm going to say a pseudo single family neighborhood, but also in an economical fashion with these types of dimensional standards, setbacks, and kind of what you've seen probably, you know, in other communities potentially. So.
Yeah, thanks,
Follow
Derek.
up, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, just thanks, Derek. That was exactly what I was asking about. Not a tiny home on a trailer, but a tiny home community. Do you foresee any additional changes we would need to make or potentially include in this ordinance to potentially energize that type of development?
Mayor, council, for the short answer would be no. I think we've given a lot of thought to trying to figure out a way to make sure that these changes accommodate those housing types, for instance, this type of housing, but others within these zoning districts. So I think that this will do that job. I think as Member Somerville mentioned in her kind of comments and questions to me was, I think probably the next step in our long-term look at our requirements is going to be in those single family zoning districts, because I think that will provide an additional opportunity and potentially another way I'm going to steal your word, to energize that type of a market within our community in those other zoning districts, you know. And so I think that that'll probably be something that we'll want to consider and look at and find out, like, you know, to what level are we willing to reduce lot sizes or add accessory dwelling units or things like that into some of those, you know, R1, LR, and RR zoning districts, which are single family zoning districts in the future.
Vice Mayor?
Like Councilor Somerville, I do have a bit of a list, but I think we're just kind of getting into it. So I'll we'll go around and I'll be quiet for.
Okay. All right. And I'll note too that this is the first reading of this. Council, I'd also note that it's 9:27, and we do have members of the public. So I would like to suggest that we not cut those folks off or cut this discussion short tonight. We can only go so much longer anyway. And I would ask if there's anyone in the council that would like to forward a motion to extend this discussion, which is our last agenda item. I see the city attorney and the city clerk are both trying to get my attention because I've probably made some sort of procedural mistake. City clerk?
Mayor, this may be what city attorney is going to address with you as well, but at the previous meeting, you had extended, the council had extended to proceed past 9:30, but your code of conduct or rules of procedure does say that you can continue this topic. It's just no introducing a new item unless you extend the meeting until 10. With reserving time at the end for public comment.
All right, so we're still okay on the agenda this evening as we're proceeding. I'm just carefully trying to make sure that people aren't cut off. And if the city attorney has lowered his hand, which he has, I'm gonna guess that that's what he was trying to let me know as well. And I thank you both. Councilmember Harrington, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No problem, Mayor. I'll just go ahead and hold mine. I think I can make mine as a comment rather, and just move. You know, I'll just wait till public comment is over.
Okay. Any other council members for their first time for questions, and then we'll go to public comment, I think. All right. Why don't we go to public comment? And I'd like to recognize Mr. Glass, and allow Mr. Glass into the meeting, and we'll give you the floor, Mr. Glass. It's all yours.
Yes, Honorable Mayor Weaver, thank you for the opportunity to comment this evening. I looked over this proposal and pulled out an envelope and scribbled on the back of it and said, wait a minute, no, this is not right. You really should vote this down even on first reading because it just doesn't make sense. The idea of decreasing the minimum lot width to 20 feet is simply that's a no-brainer. It simply is outrageous, and you wouldn't want to do it. You can't fit a double-wide trailer onto that. It would overflow on both sides. As a matter of fact, with the principal building setbacks that you see in the table in your in the proposal, 5 feet on each side, the whole thing could be 10 feet wide. That's narrower than a railroad car. That's not the kind of housing we want in Laramie. That's not going to promote business development. It's not going to promote. It's not going to promote affordable housing. It's going to be squalid if you follow these dimensions. You're going to have noise in between them that's going to make them unlivable. You're going to have tremendous population density. You'll have horrible problems with parking because, again, we've just changed our code so that the parking is per unit. And the more units you cram in there, the more of this the more problems you're going to have. You're going to have traffic. If you live in an R2 neighborhood now and you have a single-family house there, and we have a lot of single-family houses in R2 neighborhoods, it's going to be like an entire frat house moved next door. And you know who's going to buy most of these up. They're mostly going to be bought by the parents of college students, and they're going to wind up being sort of kiddie cottages. So the neighborhoods are going to become like that. This is not what we want. I mean, people don't come to Laramie from the big city to be packed in like sardines. We want to have a character that appeals to people if we want to attract people. And we were talking before about attracting businesses. We need single-family housing that's attractive in order to attract those businesses and their employees. That's not what we need here. About the only thing in the table that I see that's a positive change is that yes, we probably can reduce our front setback requirements. But that's not a reason to pass this ordinance. That could be done separately. What we'll do if we pass this is we'll change the entire character of neighborhoods. In your packet, you saw a report with a pie chart, which showed the distribution that we currently have in our R2 neighborhoods of different sized housing. And then you showed what they were aiming for, but with this change. And what this aims for is a complete transformation of the characters of the neighborhoods that are in these zones. And this is not something that not something that we want. The people who own the existing homes in those neighborhoods are going to be horribly disappointed. They're going to be driven out. Their property values are going to go down. It's not going to be the place that they thought they were going to be able to live in. Now, maybe we do want to do affordable housing, but this is not the way to do it. I'm also convinced that it's not going to be cheap. There's no reason for the developers to pass these savings on to the public, as I've said with some of the other proposals. So I think what we're going to do here is we're going to have squalor. We're not going to have better housing. We're not going to have more attractive housing. It's not going to do any positive things for Laramie. May I suggest that if we want to make housing a little bit more affordable, we look at things like maybe reducing the landscaping requirements, maybe reduce the front setback requirements, but mainly try to make sure that whatever we do, that it actually propagates through to the residents and doesn't just fatten the wallets of the developers, because frankly, that's all that this proposal would do. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Glass, and for your time and your patience in waiting to make your public comments this evening. I'd like to see if there are any other members of the public that have joined us tonight that'd like to make a comment. I know that some of the attendees have been here for quite some time, including Mr. Glass. All right. If you change your mind, you'll have another opportunity. Back to the council. Who's up? Council for further questions or comments? All right, Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm gonna, I'm gonna leave that actually. I think So one of the things I've been thinking about as we have this conversation about shrinking lot size has been sort of in the abstract, but I'll just share the very briefest version of a story from my life as a young professional with a family of 2 incomes. And this is sort of like an ongoing conversation in my household. But it sort of hit the head of a spear this morning. And so I just want to share that story with you all to sort of illustrate the point. And it is the briefest version I can give you. But my wife and I had a baby in December of last year, who you all have seen 1,000 times on Zoom. When we came home, my wife and I live in a 968 square foot house on a just shy of 3,000 square foot lot. And we live in what I would describe a desirable and highly walkable neighborhood, but our house felt too small with a baby. And we have, since December of last year, been looking for a new house. We are in no way, sort of flush with cash. We're not looking for a really expensive house, but we're also we have benefited from the increase in home value from the pandemic, just like every other homeowner. So we've been looking at a price range that feels a little unreal to me. And then recently, as recently as yesterday afternoon, I photographed for my professional life a house that was headed on to the market. I delivered those photos at 9:30 last night, and then this morning talked to my real estate agent because my wife, I showed her the pictures and she said, well, we should go look at that house. It's actually kind of nice. It is in an R2 zone, and it sold between last night and this morning. There was an offer on it for $20,000 over the asking price, which the asking price was already a stretch for my family. So I guess I share that story. We ended up, that's out of our price range. We're not doing that. But that is a consistent story. The person who purchased this home has been through a series of not being able to get the house. Over and over, they're losing a house, and they finally were like, whatever, just give them all of our money. We'll get this house. We'll go 20,000 over asking. That is a story that I'm hearing from all of my friends trying to purchase houses. The market is not sustainable in Laramie right now. And so I share that story with the intention to really illustrate the issue that we're up against as a council. This is not something we can solve. This is a really complex, multifaceted issue, but it is something that we play a role in. And I think this is a significant step in us playing our role to address this issue. And I would also leave with just a small other comment that what this does is builds neighborhoods like the ones that we all wish that everybody in town wants to live in. We just had a lengthy conversation with the West Side. That is a neighborhood with a lot of neighborhood identity and really quite a bit of community spirit. That's a neighborhood that you would be proud to live in. It is full of lots that are this size and houses that are this size. The tree area would be the next logical place in my mind, that this is what this code does. It is building neighborhoods that are walkable, that are dense enough that they feel like you know your neighbors. You're not going to have a gigantic lawn, but I'm not so sure that that's a really big deal moving into the sort of longer term future. As we all can't afford water and things like that, I'm not sure that a big lawn is going to be the biggest deal. So, I appreciate you all humoring my random personal story there, but I think it's fresh on my mind right now, and there might be a little disappointment in that story as well. But I think it illustrates a pretty real thing that's happening to a lot of families in Laramie today. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks everyone else for humoring.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. I do think it is germane to the topic. Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also like to make a comment here. In seeing a growing number of college students that are graduating and yet remaining here in town because they're finding employment with a company or finding employment with a startup where they want to remain in town, but they just graduated college. They don't have that nest egg to buy a home. They also don't want to live like a college student anymore. They have a regular income and they want to eat the nice ramen and they want to eat it in a nice kitchen that's of above ground quality, shall we say. And there is a gap, a significant gap in the housing in our community that would retain these people. I have seen over my time working with startups a number of employees of these companies that are valuable and essential to keeping them going and keeping them moving at an accelerated pace, that ultimately choose to leave because they don't feel that they can make Laramie their home, because they can't afford the houses they're seeing that are, according to Councilmember Harrington, sometimes selling for $20,000 above asking price overnight. That's a little concerning to them. Finding ways to find housing that they could be in until they can get to the point that they can purchase that, I think that's going to be critical to the growth. I don't think we have to attract people here from the big cities. I think we already have a substantial recruitment program to Laramie. We have a retention problem in Laramie that we can help solve with this legislation. So thanks much.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmeckel. Councilmember Schuster, I had you next.
Thank you. I would love to say we're fixing things. We're not. We had a housing division that was going to build on the far side of Spring Creek between 9th and about 5th. And they were showing 150 homes. Never happened. That was years ago. We had one last year. It said they were going to build out in West Laramie. They were going to be catty corner from the dorms next to Bob Blake's mobile home trail park. Not going to happen. They've given up on it. So we can put all these things together and say we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But I met with contractors this week on how frustrated they are here in Laramie. And it's not good. And I have the wildest problem yet. My family's no longer in my house. It's a 5-bedroom, 3-level house. It's huge. It has 2 family rooms, fireplace, double car garage, all that neat stuff. But I can't find any place else to move to downsize, to do that. And here I have a fantastic house that some large family'd love to have. But can't do it. I mean, it's crazy. We're showing that we're going to try to do this, this, and this, and duplexes and things like that, and I don't see it happening. The contractors are just as frustrated as you guys are on doing this. I mean, it's wild. WyoTech is growing at an extraordinary pace. If everything goes correctly, we're going to put 50 new full-time employees on next year. And I have no idea where they're even going to live. 50 new full-time, and we're one of the better paying jobs in this town. Don't know where they're going to live. So, I don't have the answer. I'd love to make 100 comments, but they wouldn't be all that nice. So I'll stop now.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Other questions and comments, first round of this time around? Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. In theory, I think this has really good potential to do some real good. I also think Councilor Schuster makes some pretty wise comments related to this is not going to fix the problem. I think there are much bigger issues at play here in terms of our housing concerns. I probably will not be supporting this. Let me just say I will not be supporting this on first reading, mostly because I think we have a zoning issue in this town. And I think we need to fix some of our zoning concerns before we go ahead and make this ordinance change. So, and I will just leave it at that. I think, you know, excluding R1, including R2, when we've got R2 areas that could very easily be R1 or vice versa, I think is concerning, is absolutely concerning, and would concern many homeowners in this community, between the differences between R1 and R2, and making some areas of R2 much more dense than they already are. So, and it's because of the zoning that I will not be supporting this. So that's it.
Other comments this round? Go back and see, council members, if we have further public comment before we go to a vote. I don't see any. Council members, more chance. Councilmember Harrington.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I know it's getting late, so I'll be very brief. One, Councilor Schuster, let's just switch houses and solve our problems. And then, you know, the second piece, the more serious piece, the last two councilors spoke about, we won't solve this problem. I would just encourage us to try. You know, if contractors are disappointed and unable to work in our system is broken, and we should do something to change it. I think this is something that we can do as a body to start working on this problem. I'm not, you know, I'm not being delusional here and saying like, yeah, this does it, we're done. You know, we'll have 50 new houses next week for the WyoTech professors that are headed into Laramie. You know, I know that that's not where we're headed, but this is going to do, this could have significant impact on starting down that path, on being an easier city to work with for developers, and finding flexibility and options for them to build housing that they see in their community as needed, but can't be achieved because there's hurdles in the zoning and code requirements. So I will, as no surprise, be supporting this, and I would encourage you all to as well. Thanks.
Other comments? Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say I have a lot of probably more technical questions that I don't want to take up the council's time with tonight. But Mr. Cheney, I will certainly give you a ring on some of those questions regarding garage layouts and how close accessory buildings can be in those type of things. I will say, although I'm very interested in the concept, I really struggle a little bit with how small a 2,500 square foot lot is. I tried to walk it this afternoon in my yard based on my size, and I cannot visualize how that actually works very well at all. And so I might need some help in that area as well. But Mayor, that's all the comments I have for tonight.
Sure, Councilmember Somerville. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I invite Councilor Somerville to take a look at the county assessor site. There are plenty of lots like that. There's a very cute house on 15th. It's on a lot that's that size. I like the idea of having a diversity of housing and lot sizes. And I know a lot of people my age are looking to downsize their lot because of the maintenance of trying to maintain a yard. So I think this is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. Other comments? All right, I'll make it just a quick one. This is a complicated topic, and just like everything with our housing discussion, it's frustratingly complex. I read through the public feedback, the written public feedback that was supplied to us that Mr. Cheney referenced earlier. talked to a couple of council members on an individual basis about this, and I think everybody kind of raises some strong arguments. I wouldn't even call them arguments, but just points. I have to say though, I'm not persuaded by an argument or a point of view that says our problems are really extreme. This isn't going to deal with them, so therefore we shouldn't do anything. And I don't know, maybe that's not what people are arguing, but I'm more persuaded by we've got to start somewhere. And that goes back to the other discussion we had about parking. I mean, there has to be some initial steps here. And it almost seems like we run the risk of a paralysis with the enormity of the problem and the fact that some of our solutions just seem so inadequate that there's nothing we can do, and we're just in a static situation. When the housing studies that we've done, the economic development studies that we've done have told us we have got to take some steps. We're told that we're losing economic development opportunities because of the housing situation. We have a council member that's sharing concerns about where people are going to live, even if their economic situation, their employment situation is changing, and we have some dynamism in our local economy. We don't know where these people are going to live. That to me says we don't have the luxury of doing nothing. We've got to start somewhere. So I'm gonna support this on first reading. I don't particularly care if I have the last word on this, so if there's somebody else that wants to weigh in one more time, you can do it. Otherwise, we can go to a vote. I don't see any hands up in the attendees. I suspect that there will be more to this conversation going forward. City Clerk, let's have a roll call vote.
Cumbie. Sorry. Cumbie.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
No.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 8 yeses and 1 no, Your Honor.
That motion carries on first reading. All right. City Clerk, do we now have to close the meeting?
Mayor, at this time, the council can either take a 2/3 vote to extend the meeting to 10 to introduce a new item. But either way that the council goes on this, you are still required to have your public comment period at the end of the meeting.
All right. Why don't we go to the public comment period? There are no new items to introduce, so we'll go to the public comment period on non-agenda items. Seeing none, council, for the public comment on non-agenda items, I think that does bring us to the last item on the agenda. I'm going to go to Council Member Schuster.
Thank you. I move we adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand or both.
Aye.
Aye.